Hello and welcome, everyone. We are the Gaming Stooges. If you don't know us, we are stooges that happen to be into gaming. Oh, wow.
Whoa. Don't tell them our fucking secrets right out the gate, Cloud.
I'm Cloud. That's Jack.
I'm Jack.
I'm Justin, I guess.
Say your line.
And
I'm Landon.
That's Landon. So today we're doing our first real podcast-style talks video. And guys, you like video games, right?
I fucking hate video games.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess this whole talk is over then.
All right. Good night. Bye.
Good night, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
No, but
Bye.
Well, I would hope that if you like video games, you probably like playing them with a controller.
No,
unless you're one of those.
My favorite controller is the Microsoft Kinect.
Unless you're one of those
powers.
Mind powers.
I'm going to mind hack it.
Today we're going to talk about video game console controllers, and specifically the controllers that at some point were pack-in controllers or first-party advertised controllers for their respective consoles. We're going to be going through quite a lot. This is not a comprehensive list. We definitely missed out on a lot of lesser known or less popular gaming platforms. Those streaming platforms like Amazon Luna and Google Stadia, we didn't do that. Some very, very unpopular consoles like the Sega SG-1000 and stuff like that. We didn't include that either. But we're going to go through the different evolutions, and I believe we've got about 30 different controllers, and I should probably start playing the background music that I had going. We'll have credits for the background music that we have playing in the description of our YouTube upload. Shout out to Wipeout Audio for the music that we'll be playing.
Royalty free.
Royalty free. So yeah, we're going to start with a very popular, well-known controller. It's a bit loud. Okay, I'll try and get it down as much as I can.
The ColecoVision.
No, actually, we got one.
Yeah.
We got one that comes out even before that. So, hi everybody. We've got our webcams. We're actually going to be here, so you'll be able to hear us, and hopefully that audio. Is the audio a little bit better for the music, Al? We've got one of our longtime viewers in the chat on our live stream today, as per usual.
Who's that again?
I would turn it down a little bit more.
A little bit more? I'm actually going to have to go into the mixer settings then. Because I had Google Chrome.
Jack, what have you been playing recently?
What have I been playing recently?
Yeah, what have you been playing recently?
Oh, fuck. Shit. What have I been playing recently?
All right,
Good answer.
Good answer. We just finished the Ace Attorney Investigations 2.
We did do that.
On our fucking YouTube channel.
Is that better, Al?
Somewhere.
We should have had that going.
Technically,
first.
we streamed it here on Twitch, but
We also just played through the Stanley Parable.
True.
Literally last night.
I already forgot about it.
Yeah, good job.
It was fun though. I'm not saying it wasn't. Just came in.
Have you been playing anything fun?
I finished Phantasy Star 4. Is the background audio? Okay, the audio's good now. All right. So, sorry about that. So, the first one that we're going to talk about is a very popular one. Everybody knows about it, but I'm sure a few of us have actually held one in our hands. But it's the Atari 2600 joystick.
Well, I have.
Justin has one, but unfortunately he doesn't have a working webcam to actually show us. But it was a very popular system for its time. It's very simple. It's a joystick and a button, and you hold it, and you press the button, and you move the stick, and it's pretty much as simple as it gets. But it was kind of revolutionary. I mean, you had some console. We have cats as well, apparently, on our webcams because they want to interrupt us. But the 2600. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about the controller. It did everything it had to do. You had your one stick, you had your one button. That's pretty much how all games played at the time. You just needed one button and a stick. I personally have never used this one. I don't know if any of you guys have, except for Justin. Justin said he has.
I mean...
Yeah. If you're a guy, you already know half the work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I've definitely bludgeoned people with them before.
in my dark fantasies.
In your dark fantasies. So yeah, no, I haven't used it. I think it's... I guess it's a pretty important controller, but it's not really like something that even controllers nowadays have like any resemblance to, besides having an action button of sorts. So
0 out of 10. Get rid of it.
Unfortunately, we're going to be flying through a lot of these early controllers pretty quick because we lack experience with a lot of these.
The closest thing to anything like this that I've done is like the plug and play games.
Yeah, because they do a lot of plug and plays.
I have a Shenron one.
Oh yeah, I think you showed us. Well, I think you posted a picture of that in our Discord. Which, by the way, join our Discord if you haven't. We have links to our Discord in various places. Yes, it'll be down below as it usually is. And it's transformed into a cat again. So we're just going to move on to the next one. It's pretty much the same thing. The Magnavox Odyssey 2 had a pretty similar controller. It was a joystick and a button, except it looks a little less comfortable, to be honest. I've never held one. I've never even seen one in my life. I've at least seen Atari 2600 joysticks because they sell them at my local game store. Odyssey, though, no. I've never even seen one in person.
The ridges on that control stick look fucking terrible.
Oh yeah, they look really, really bad.
Somebody just jabbed the joystick through a fucking cartridge.
I like it. Al said we didn't post a link to the stream in the Discord.
I apologize for that. That's my own fault. I was busy actually getting the stuff ready, so I didn't really...
I'll do it.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it's
just
not a whole lot to say. We're going to move on to two controllers, though, back-to-back that are a little different. First was the Intellivision.
I think I do have to interrupt real quick.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Cloud, you have to get Pixel some Ben & Jerry's.
I have to get Pixel some Ben & Jerry's? Why?
Uh-huh.
Why?
I said that you were at the store and you were willing to get everyone in our Discord something.
I never agreed to this!
Well, too bad.
Gee, that's too bad.
Nice. But no, unfortunately I do not have the means to do that. But yeah, the next one is the Mattel Intellivision, which this and the next controller are very weird. We've never seen anything like them since. You got what looks like a dial, but it is actually a pad. It is a multi-directional pad that if you press in different points, it will go in that direction. And then they, for some reason, have...
That's just a cell phone.
Yeah, it has like cell phone structured buttons. That's what was used for the Intellivision. And then they also have some buttons on the sides that you can press. There's like 2 buttons on like the left side, 2 on the right. I never played a television, although they sometimes have them at my LGS. They're not expensive though, so I mean, there's not a whole lot of people collecting them. The Coleco hand controller for the ColecoVision is not much different, except the dial's now raised, and there was actually, it's designed that, the button tray is designed that way so that you can actually put like these little inserts and like customize the controller based on which game you're playing. But that's really it. They also have buttons on the sides, the gray buttons. But there's not really a whole lot to say. Like, these controllers were very weird. They're very for their time. I've never touched one in my life. I don't know if any of you guys have touched any of these in your life.
That's a calculator.
My dad had a lot of these old consoles, but I never actually got to use them myself because they were gone by the time I was born.
Yeah. My mom, I know, had a 2600, but she did not have it by the time I was getting into games, so I never got to actually play it. But she mentioned telling me she had an Atari. She used to play Atari, so that's how we ended up moving on to the NES and other stuff that would be popular at the time. So we're just going to skip forward, and this is where things get interesting. This is where we actually have experience with a lot of these controllers. First up, we've got the Famicom and the NES. I don't have a picture for it for the stream, but there's also... one thing that was interesting about the Famicom is that despite them being different systems, the Player 1 controller for the Famicom and the NES actually have the same layout. They're just designed a little differently. They have, you know, your typical D-pad, which has been used in most of Nintendo's controllers since, even their weirdest ones. They still have that D-pad. They've got a start and select button. They have A and B buttons. So this is pretty much when like controllers kind of started to form some ideas that would actually stick through each generation. And it is worth noting that the Famicom has two controllers that are different, and they are wired hard to the console. They're not like removable like the NES controller was. So even at this time, there was actually like a mix between consoles having hardwired controllers or removable plug-in controllers that you can swap out as you want. But I think when the NES came stateside, outside of Japan, that's when we started seeing that it'd be pretty much mandated that you would have a lot of controllers that get plugged into the system and can be removed. But the second controller for the Famicom is weird because it doesn't have the start and select, it has a speaker, which we never got that over here. It was just the Player One controller redesigned the whole time. This was my first controller.
Used in games.
Yep, it was sometimes used in games. Unfortunately, I don't have experience with that. Landon, do you?
I usually.
Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Oh. I was just saying, I usually don't really like controls that are just gray. I like to have some color on it, but I don't know. The Famicom has colors that I think they look kind of weird together.
Yeah, it's really retro. Like, it's not a control scheme, a controller colors idea that you like see nowadays. It's pretty much a bygone sort of thing. But it is a cool look. But I can't imagine that the gold paint like ages well. I've seen some pictures where like the paint's like chipping off.
Red and gold is I don't know. I like it.
It does look pretty cool.
It's a pleasing color scheme.
Unfortunately, I don't have one of these controllers at the moment. They do sell a lot of third-party, like aftermarket controllers that are like as identical to the NES controller as possible that you can get for like retro consoles, including the NES itself. So you don't have to go hunting down like old OEM model versions of the controllers. I don't currently have one. Anyone here have an NES controller currently?
Nope.
I used to, but that kind of went the way of the dodo.
Yeah.
Cheese Whiz ate mine.
Cheese Whiz ate his.
The NES is actually the second controller I ever used.
Our
does.
friend Al has an NES controller still. I think at least the build of like the buttons, like the quality of the buttons, I think that held up. But being like a boxy, like rectangular design, not having a whole lot of buttons, I think that's kind of aged. But it got away with what it needed to, I think, for the time. It had enough buttons to get the controls for games that you needed. Pretty much extremely similar to the NES and Famicom, and which came out shortly after, was the Master System. I might mix up some of my info because I had my info as best I could, but the Master System has two different versions of the controller, as you can see in this. If you're watching the VOD, we have a picture of the two controllers. They're based on their region. One region had just a D-pad, the other had a D-pad with a little joystick nub that you would press on. So they basically just got rid of the nub for the other region. I think that the joystick was used on the Japanese version, or it might have been the American version, and then the other way around when it was outside of Japan, they either took off or they removed the little knob. But effectively they work the same, and they have 1 and 2 buttons. They have, and the 1 button also acts as like a start button. No other buttons. It's just the D-pad, the 2 buttons. That's it. I don't know how this system managed to get by and have a library of games with just 2 buttons, but it managed.
From what I remember, the history, the Master System was like super popular in Europe.
It was. It wasn't really popular in Japan. It wasn't really popular in the United States or North America. It's extremely popular in Brazil. I don't know why. It's extremely popular, sells extremely well in Brazil. But it is a controller that's a piece of history. It's very weird though, because I think it's like the last time we would see something like this that was like a D-pad and a stick at the same time. Like, I don't know, that's just so unique. But
the thing doesn't even look like it has a pause button.
It doesn't. once you started a Master System game, like that was it. Like you played the game. Like there was, I don't know if
there's
like,
no getting off this ride.
Pretty much. I've played with a Master System controller one time. One of my very good friends, he owns a Master System. I don't know if he still does, but he owned one, and I actually got to play. I can't remember what game it was, but we played a little bit of Master System, and it's a pretty cool controller. Not enough buttons, obviously, but it works. Not quite as comfortable as the NES controller either, because of the weird D-pad. I like the D-pad on the NES controller more.
It also looks like there's a bit of a, like it's like raised a little higher on the edges.
Yeah, it is. It's got like a weird little concave design. And a few more controllers we're going to get to later on. They did that weird sort of concave design to a D-pad that's kind of similar to this. We'll get there when we get there, but it is kind of weird. And Sega, will say, is not done with some weird aspects to their controllers. But does anybody else have anything to say about the Master System? I know Experience is kind of...
Not even a little.
Nah, I've only experienced it through fucking Sonic Adventure, like, in-game emulation.
Same.
No, Landon? That grumpy look says no? No. No. Okay.
I want Cookie, though.
After that, we got Atari returning with the 7800. They had a 5200. It was basically just almost the same as the 2600, and it wasn't popular at all, so I skipped it. But the 7800, it did kind of well. It basically did, yeah.
I love this fucking picture.
Yes, that's the best picture I could find.
You need to zoom out and get the person's feet in there too.
I wish, but yeah, the thing about the 78,
it looks like a cheese grater.
That's a thermometer.
The stick was it's weird.
A door
so
wedge.
yeah, it looks like a door wedge. It's shaped like a door wedge. It has the same stick, a similar stick.
It looks like a gas pedal.
It has a similar style stick to the 2600s.
Guitar pedal.
And then it has, instead of one button on the top like the 2600 had, it has two buttons on the sides. So you have the two buttons, and then if you want, you can like do the joystick and you can press. So I've never held one though in my life. Like the system sold some okay, like it was like a couple million units, but I've never in my life touched one of these things. It's weird as fuck looking. So
it's cursed.
It is cursed. It's very cursed.
I feel like having looked at this, has put a curse upon my life.
So
I think it goes in rectally. And the game system from there.
Of course.
Yeah.
My goodness. But yeah, no, as you can tell with the lack of experience we have for early controllers, we are not even 20 minutes in.
Not real gamers.
No.
We are 20 minutes into the stream, right? And we've already like flown right through about 10 controllers.
Keep going.
But the fact is,
these are dinosaur controllers.
But these are dinosaur controllers.
This is before dirt.
And a lot of these controllers, the thing about the early controllers is they were highly experimental. This was a no man's land of controllers at this time. Like, nobody knew how to get a controller 100% right. It was basically like they made the controller, but they didn't really design it around games that they were anticipating coming out. They just kind of like, here's a controller, it'll do stuff, kind of make a game to work with this controller. They didn't make the controller based on the games, I don't think.
I would say Nintendo's NES controller was like the first one.
Yeah, I'd agree.
To not be fucking stupid.
Games.
Right, yeah. I think the NES controller, the Famicom controller, those were like, they actually started designing things in a very deliberate way. But skipping ahead, we've got the TurboGrafx 16 and the PC Engine. Unfortunately, the PC Engine controller, that's the best controller I could find, a picture I could find.
Jesus.
Unfortunately, like, there's just a lot of, like, I could find pictures of the TurboGrafx 16 controller very well. Not so much the PC Engine controllers. But interesting note, it was a pretty popular system. Not as much as the Master System, or not as much as the Master System, not as much as the Genesis or the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Super Nintendo. But it was the first 16-bit console to come out, and this was the controller we got with it. It was a little bit more 8-bit console generation style controller, as you can see. The weird thing, though, is that the Japanese version was basically just like an NES controller. You had a D-pad, you had the start and select, and then you had 1 and 2 buttons. But the TurboGrafx 16 actually added turbo sliders for their 1 and 2 buttons. So you could actually, so that's why the turbo in TurboGrafx 16 probably stems from them adding the turbo function. I've never played with a TurboGrafx 16, unfortunately. I've heard, you know, there's quite a few enthusiasts for the system, but you can see it's a pretty basic controller. I think if they had just waited like a year, they probably would have come up with another controller, because the controllers for the next series of consoles are a little bit more advanced. As you can see, it's a lot more like 8-bit style, but I think it probably works.
That controller looks like a fake video game controller you see when like a background character is playing video games in like a children's live action series.
Yeah.
Like something like, I don't know, Cory in the House.
Cory in the House?
Are we allowed to say
or
that?
Goosebumps.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. So yeah, it's I've never had any experience with this controller. I don't know if anybody else here has played TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine.
Nope.
I've seen people play it, but I've never done it.
We have a person in our Discord server who has quite a lot of experience with the PC Engine. We are not those people, though, so we are going to move on. I think that the Turbo is a pretty cool idea. It's the only controller on this entire slew of controllers that has that. But next was the Sega Genesis / Sega Mega Drive. We've got very iconic controller. Their first controller, admittedly, probably could have used some more buttons, but you had a nice, somewhat ergonomic design for the time. You had this nice croissant-shaped controller. It's shaped like a croissant! Like, I had to mention it. It looks like a croissant. But it has a nice...
I tried to eat it.
It's got a nice D-pad, ABC buttons, start button up top. That's pretty easy to get to from those 3 buttons. I did recently use one. I don't have it with me, but I have used the one that comes with the Genesis Mini. So I have experience with the controller very recently. And I don't know about you guys, but I think it holds up pretty well. Obviously, they definitely did a better job when they revised this thing, which more on that in a little bit. But
the 3-button is trash baby garbage. Get rid of that.
I will say there
0 out of 10.
There was some controversy when they came out with the Genesis Mini, and they were like, why didn't it have the 6-button controller? And then they came out with the Genesis Mini 2, and it has the 6-button controller. But, I mean, I'm fond of it. I have had fond memories with it.
I like it.
I'm sure that Justin's got a lot of experience with it, too.
Well, yeah, this was the first controller I ever used.
Well, there you go. How do you feel about it?
I find it funny, though, that they only added 1 extra button from the Master System. It's just like, here, have 1 more.
Yeah, I mean, they also added a start button, a dedicated start button, but yeah.
Oh, fuck, I can finally stop.
I think what Sega really contributed to more with this controller than anything else is the idea that controllers should feel kind of good to hold and not be like cramp inducing.
Yeah, not boxes.
Exactly. Like because there were so many rectangular controllers or so many like weird like box shaped controllers with a big stick coming out of them, which there's going to be a few more on this, by the way. We're not even done with them yet. But
we're not done with controllers yet?
Well, those style of controllers. But I mean, Sega was the first to really say, hey, let's make the controller, you know, kind of a shape that actually fits the hands kind of good. So yeah, let's go back to the rectangle. No, I think we've moved on from that now. I'm glad we have. But the next one, I don't know unless you guys had anything else you wanted to add to the Genesis controller. The next one that came out was the Neo Geo, which weirdly the Neo Geo. The reason why the controller looks like this is because there was a home console version and there was an arcade cabinet version. Because what they did was, rather than make the arcades for a specific game, they actually made the arcades with the console, and then they could sell them to retailers, and they would swap the game out. So when they came out with a home version, they needed something comparable to this, and so we have this Neo Geo joystick controller that's got your joystick and the 4 pad buttons, as well as a start and select button that were on the arcade cabinet to start with. I mean, it's a fight stick that turned out to be the pack-in controller for a console. That's as best I can say. If you've used an arcade cabinet before, this is probably kind of familiar looking. Fun fact, I remember telling Landon and Jack this, or Justin.
That's me.
But there used to be an arcade cabinet that was at an arcade that I went to as a kid, and I didn't realize it till later. But that arcade cabinet that I played at that arcade happened to be a Neo Geo arcade cabinet. I don't remember what game it was playing, but I do distinctly remember the SNK logo, the Neo Geo logo, everything. And it's a pretty good controller to use for the games that they made it for. I don't think it holds up today, but I mean, it definitely did a decent job of being pretty comfortable, at least in the arcade. So I assume you could kind of work with it. That thing is massive, though. Like, that thing is big, even for the home version.
I've never used one of these, but I admire its design. I like what it's going for.
Yeah, it's an admirable design. I don't know if anybody else.
How many alligators big is it?
I don't know how big it is, but I think it's like this.
About 6 alligators.
Six alligators. That's 6 alligators.
Thank you.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's saying this big doesn't mean anything if this is a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's about 6 alligators. No, it's probably more about like the lines of like I don't know, like
it's one whole Momo.
It's one Momo. It's one Momo.
A whole Momo.
It might honestly, I would reckon it's probably about as big as the average cat, maybe a little smaller. But moving on,
is it as big as a Cheese Whiz?
He's chubby now.
Oh, I gotta move the chat up further. So the next controllers, we've got the very iconic Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, and unlike the Famicom and NES, there's no difference besides the colors. You've got the same colors for both of them.
No, they have different logos.
They have different logos. Okay, that's
totally
true.
Different controllers. Come on,
totally different controllers because of the 2 logos.
Yep.
All right. This was not my first controller, but this is the first controller of the first console I owned. So this is something I have a lot of experience with. I'm sure a couple of you guys here have used a Super Nintendo controller quite a lot in your lives.
Yeah.
I think you're unraveling yours.
Yeah.
Jack has one. First party one too. It looks like it's in good shape.
Yep.
It's I don't have the actual first party one, but I do have an aftermarket one from Hyperkin, which I use with my Retron 5. And it's mostly the same. It's slightly shaped differently. It's got some like curvature to the back here, but otherwise, I mean, you've got the buttons are colored differently, but you've got your concave. Thing about that was actually interesting about the Super Nintendo is that the X and Y are concave while the A and B are convex, so they were there to like kind of guide you. So like if you were playing like Mario World, you'd have the Y button was concave, you'd hold that down, and then your B button you could rest your thumb on. You could, kind of click that for your jump button. So this was, I know it's such a stupid thing to say, but like just these small additions, like the L and R buttons, having the concave buttons paired with the convex buttons, it's such an elegant design. It's so neat how they managed to come up with a simple design for a controller, and they gave you just enough buttons. You had shoulder buttons, you had your ABXY, which is something that you'd see for a lot of controllers going forward. It basically revolutionized controllers as we know it. If I had to be a little... Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I don't think I am when I say that the Super Nintendo controller was very revolutionary, because you'd have that ABXY, the shoulder buttons were a mandate, and Not every controller would have like the concave convex thing going forward. That was kind of just a Super Nintendo thing, but it worked really well for the Super Nintendo itself, I think. They gave, I think, developers an idea of, you know, what buttons to use for what actions, which is something that another company took a lot of thought into their controller. We'll get to in a little bit. Does anybody want to share their experiences with the Super Nintendo controller?
This is a fucking great controller. It does exactly what it needs to, pretty much perfectly.
Yeah, I agree.
For the games on the system, and for like the way that the games are played, like this is I don't want to say top 5 controller, but like it's up there.
I would say, yeah. So we're going to talk about these controllers a little more at the end segment, where we'll go over our favorites and which ones we think were personally the most revolutionary. I'm not sure if I'd put it as one of my favorites, but it's definitely one of the ones that was pushing the industry forward on controllers and really getting controllers to a level where we'd see them today. Like, if it weren't for the Super Nintendo controller, I don't know where our controllers would look like today. You okay, Landon?
Yeah, someone asked me, or someone in our chat asked forehead reveal, so I'm covering my forehead.
Don't reveal the foreheads, everyone. Keep them.
Yeah.
God.
Justin, did you have anything to share about the Super Nintendo controller?
This is the third controller I ever used in my life. And by the way, I'm not going to keep track of this shit because I don't remember past the Super NES. But I mostly played this a lot with like Super Mario World. Like, even though I like 3 more, I did play the Super NES for a little bit. Unfortunately, ours didn't last that long. So after that, it was pretty much all Sega until like the PlayStation came out.
Right. So, moving to the next controller, we've got the 6-button controller for the Genesis, and this was pretty much made as a response to the Super Nintendo controller, and fighting games in particular. There was some genres, but particularly fighting games, where they were doing really well on the Super Nintendo because they had all these extra buttons to do all of these extra actions that you needed them to do. I mean, Street Fighter 2 is like one of the big ones where it had just enough buttons, like Jack said. It had just enough to do it perfectly. Well, the Sega Genesis controller only had like 3 buttons and a start button, so they didn't have all of that. So they came out with the 6-button controller, has an X, Y, and Z. And I mean, other than that, it's pretty much the same controller, but it would go on to inform Sega's next controller afterwards. So it is worth mentioning. This was a controller I had a lot of experience with, because I believe that the controller that I had, my sister had specifically, was from the Genesis model that had this controller. It's mostly shaped almost similar to the 3-button controller, but you got it's a little more rounded croissant. But it's got the ABC XYZ buttons, so it had enough buttons. Still 1 button short of the Super Nintendo, because the Super Nintendo had a select button as well. But basically did everything it needed to do. I mean, I don't really know if there's much else you can say about it. It's a decent controller. It was a response to the Super Nintendo controller, basically. Yeah.
It's just a better version of the Genesis controller.
It really is. I mean, it got those extra buttons to do the stuff that the Genesis controller needed to do that it wasn't doing before.
6 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
So that Genesis could finally does.
So Genesis could finally does.
You know,
needs more.
I'm gonna pour gasoline all over the Genesis community because I actually don't like this controller.
Really?
Is there a reason you don't like it?
I honestly always found the button layout a bit awkward, and most importantly, I fucking hate the shape of that controller. Like, it never felt good in my hands.
It's a bean.
I'll admit that the X, Y, and Z are kind of small, and the fact that they're so convex, where the A, B, and C are concave, but like
they did it backwards.
Yeah, they did it backwards, and the X, Y, and Z are so like narrow that I don't know if it's not quite as good as the SNES controller the way that it did it. But yeah, it came out in 1993, a few years after the rest of the controllers for that era had come out. But afterwards, not more than like a year later, we had the next generation of systems. And the first system out the gate, because it was trying to rush out the gate, was the Saturn. And it had two different controllers for the two different releases. There was the Japanese version, which basically took after the 6-button controller, although it added an L and R button. It might be hard to see in our picture if you're watching the VOD, but they're basically like right near the tops of this strange, almost like boomerang looking design. It's kind of like a weird, like it's like it squishes the middle part of the 6-button controller, but otherwise it looks the same.
It's a robot croissant.
It's a robot
I'm gonna be
croissant.
honest. The Western version of the Saturn's controller looks fucking funny to me because the outline makes it look like they just jammed the Model 2 Genesis controller into the Saturn controller.
Yeah, so the weird thing about the one that we got outside of Japan, at first it had this weird concave design, and remember when I went back and I was talking about the Master System? This is kind of like that, although it's a lot more rounded instead of it being like square shaped, but it's basically the same thing. It's very weird though. It does have an L and R button. They're a little bit kind of like facing outward as opposed to being up on the top of the controller because of the design being kind of weird. But otherwise it has the same A, B, C, X, Y, Z buttons. They're just, you know, modeled differently. The shape is a little weirder though because the grips were like it kind of informs where your hands should be.
It's very angular.
Yeah, it's very angular. It's not rounded like the Saturn or even the Genesis 6-button controller. The Japanese Saturn, that is. It's a little weird. I don't have a lot of experience with this controller. I like had a Saturn for like all of 2 seconds, and I was a kid and I had no idea what it was doing with it. And also, none of the games that I had were all Genesis games, so I couldn't play it.
I actually do remember playing the Saturn because I remember playing a Casper the Friendly Ghost game on the fucking Saturn of all things.
Yeah, if you think these controllers might be like the North American version of this controller is a little weird, just wait a second because we're gonna get to a weirder controller for the Saturn, officially from Sega, in a little bit. Landon, I'm guessing you don't really have anything to add. I don't think you have a lot of experience with the Sega Saturn.
I typically don't eat robot croissants.
Landon Cohen, our resident comedian, everyone.
Yes, this one's a little stale.
Piggybacking off of my joke.
That's what best comedians do. They take jokes,
and then they make them better.
No, we just take them.
Oh, okay.
That's the end of the sentence.
I finished my thought.
The next controller that would come out, which would be with the system that it released with, was the Sony PlayStation, which originally Sony did not put their controller. Their controller didn't have. It was weird. The PlayStation was one of the first like 3D focus consoles. Like, yes, the Saturn could do it, but it wasn't really a focal point of the system. No, the Sony PlayStation, they wanted 3D games. And yet the first controller does not have sticks or anything. We'll get to that. But Sony did Sony did come out with a pretty interesting controller. They have 2 sets of shoulder buttons. First controller to really do this. Instead of just an L and R, you had an L1 and R1 and an L2 and R2. They have a a little bit of a different take on the directional pad where it's like split. So all the buttons are separated, but they are still underneath the controller. They're like connected by like a pivoting point. So you can still rock your thumb around. It's just the buttons themselves are split on the top of the controller. You've got your start and select like most systems have, although Sony did a weird thing where much like how the Super Nintendo kind of made its controller to like give kind of inform the developers how to build a game with those buttons. Sony did something very similar. They have X, circle, triangle, and square for their buttons, which they'd use for every system since. And they were meant to symbolize different things, like X and circle were yes and no. These get flipped from inside of Japan and outside of Japan, but they still both mean yes and no when you put them together. The square button was a menu or like information button, so you could get like extra, you know, stuff that way. And then the triangle is supposed to be a viewpoint or camera control button, basically. So this was something that they really like put a lot of thought into, and it's kind of between the Super Nintendo controller and the Sony PlayStation controller, they basically kind of started getting an idea that certain buttons should kind of do certain things. Obviously, with genre differences, that's going to differ based on which genre you're playing, which buttons should do what things. But we start really getting an idea that controllers are starting to be built with the games in mind, as opposed to just kind of building a controller and then trying to build games around it after the fact. I do not have experience really though with this version of the controller. I didn't get a PlayStation until well after.
This was the first iteration of the PlayStation controller I ever used, because I specifically remember the shoulder buttons, like the L2 and R2 button. They're not the fat buttons that a lot of people are used to. They're actually just about as thin as the L1 and R1.
Exactly. And that is something weird and different that they would basically desert with one of their next controllers going forward and never go back.
Yeah.
Compared to future DualShocks, this one has...
This isn't even a DualShock.
It looks like it's missing something, right?
It looks skinny.
The picture, honestly, it's playing mind games with me. I think it's the lack of the thumbsticks, but it looks like it's long.
So there is a version of the PlayStation controller where the grips are a little longer. But yes, importantly, the Sony PlayStation controller is known for being one of the first controllers that had dedicated hand grips. Like, you'd have like little like curvature to controllers to kind of guide your hands to. No, Sony put this controller out and they were like, this is where your hands rest. You hold the controller like this. And
hold it. Firmly grasp it in your hand.
Between this and the next controller we're going to go over, this is when controllers really started kind of like, this is how you should hold it. Here's a guide. Here's buttons. These buttons should do certain things. We're actually really starting to see the modernizing of controllers right around this period.
Would you say PlayStation like standardized the grip?
I would say they did. I think so. What is that, Landon? Is that a...
Oh, this is how you're supposed to hold the controller, right?
Yeah. So you can't see it.
Exactly correct.
If you're watching the VOD, Landon is holding the controller by like the middle portion, which you do not hold a controller by.
What are you talking about?
No way.
This is where the handhold is. Break that controller? God, no. This is my Goku DualShock 4.
You hold it by the grips. You don't hold it like this. But, no, if, moving on to the next controller, we're actually going to go back to the Sega Saturn for a moment before we go on to the next actual system. They came out with a controller called the 3D, 3D pad.
This fucking thing.
Yeah, this thing This thing is weird. So it's got this weird, like, pizza design to it. It still has the A, B, C, X, Y, Z buttons. It has
fat croissant.
It has an L and R button. You can't see them, but they're more trigger-like, and they're on the back of the controller. They still have the start button in the middle. They've got the D-pad, and they added an analog stick. It was technically the first major controller to have an analog stick and a D-pad separately, but in fairness, it did come out like just a few weeks before the system with the next controller, which would be the N64. We'll get to that in a second. And so it's hard to really gauge and say that like Sega came up with this first, because Nintendo was working on the N64 for quite a few years at that point. I don't think that they came up with this before Nintendo came up with the N64 and came up with the controller for it. It just happened to come out first. But this was basically, they came out with it as a way of controlling some of their 3D games that were coming out at the time. Nights into Dreams was like a big one. Like, that's the big Saturn game, and it probably plays a lot better with this controller than the one without an analog stick. Xbox or GameCube more, asking one of our viewers. We'll probably get to that in a little bit. We're pretty close to it. We'll talk about that when we get there, because we're going through the whole history from this point forward. I've never actually. I think this is the controller that I used, though. I don't think I used the controller that it had the that was packed in originally. I think this was the controller that I got with my Saturn that I used for all of 2 seconds and couldn't actually use it. It looks. One of our other viewers says looks like a frisbee. It does look like a frisbee. It's very
he's not hungry.
It's very disc shaped. One fun fact though about this controller. I don't have a picture for it, but I had saw in an article many pictures of different angles of the controller. The part where the cord is not wholly attached to the controller. You can take that out, and it's hypothesized that there was meant to be a possibility of maybe a wireless adapter that could go in there. It was never explored because the Saturn didn't do well enough to do this, but technically you can take that part that has the cord out. So that's kind of interesting.
I mean, I'd believe it considering how Sega kept making these fucking Transformers for consoles.
They were really experimental. It's Sega. Sega's weird. Did any of you get to use this controller?
Nope.
Nah, like I said, that Casper game is the only experience I have with the Saturn.
Right. What about you, Landon? No?
I ate one once. We're talking about pizzas, right?
No, we're talking about the Saturn 3D controller.
Oh. I don't know what you're talking about.
Alright, so we'll move on to the next controller, and the next controller is the Nintendo 64. This was the first controller to be packed in with the console with an analog stick. So this is kind of big.
Boy.
Unfortunately, this thing looks fucking weird. So
yeah,
we gotta go over this. If you've used an N64 controller, you know, but it has 3 prongs. There's 2 grips on the sides, there's one in the middle. The one in the middle has the analog stick, so if you're playing certain games that are going to be in 3D, you're probably going to be holding the middle and the right. If you're playing more 2D oriented games, you'll probably be holding the left and the right. It's very weird. Jack has an N64 controller, so does Landon. They actually still have theirs. I do not, unfortunately.
Shame.
But notably, the N64 did something very weird. So the N64 has the analog stick, you've got an A and B button still returning. They did not bring back the X and Y buttons from the Super Nintendo, but they have 4 C buttons, C up, left, right, and down. And those would control certain things depending on which game. Then there's the L and R, which were returning. And then behind the analog stick on the back of the controller is a Z button, which is... It's not an actual trigger, but it's in a position where you would press a trigger, so it has a 3rd button on the back. So it's very interesting controller, and no other controller in the history of controllers ever has done this specific design ever again. But it's...
Yeah, because no one has 3 hands.
No one has 3 hands, exactly.
Well, it's mostly that they kind of, they didn't put the stick dead center in the controller.
Right, yeah.
How many croissants is this?
I would say it's about 3 croissants.
3 croissants big or 3 croissants total?
3 croissants big. I don't know.
I think Cloud is just hungry.
I am hungry.
I mean, looking at that,
I'm not Cloud, but I'm hungry.
It's like half a pizza.
It's like a hand.
It's like, yeah, it is like a hand. It's kind of shaped like a hand. Which is weird because you probably shouldn't be holding something that's shaped like a hand for your controller, but... imagine you have to hold someone's hand to play a game. That's...
Whoa.
That's too lewd. That's too much.
Oh. Jack and I did that once. We were holding hands while we played Kirby.
I find the C buttons were kind of like the whatever buttons, if it wasn't tool intensive like Zelda, it was just camera controls.
Yeah, they changed, the developers made the different buttons work depending on which one you were doing. If you were playing Pokemon Stadium, that's how you picked your attacks, is they had you'd go into and you'd press the C up, left, right, or down in order to select which move you were going to do. In, I think in Mario 64, it sort of controlled the camera. I don't remember. I know that the Z button, one of the shoulder buttons would like reset the camera behind you, but I think the C buttons could like adjust it. But certain games would do different things with the C button, so it wasn't like a specific, you know, the C buttons do this almost all the time. They didn't do stuff like that. But yeah, as far as controllers go, it's weird. It's very weird. Like, they have a lot of buttons, so there's a lot of options to do certain things. But as far as the layout, the form factor, it is an ugly duckling.
Yeah, what you don't see is the Z button on the back.
It definitely spreads your butthole wide when you try to insert it.
What?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, wasn't this the first controller with Rumble?
Not on its own, but it was so I didn't mention this, but there was an expansion slot on the back of the controllers. If you were watching the VOD, I'm sure you might have caught a glimpse of it when Jack and Landon were holding theirs. But you could put these little cartridges into the expansion slots. One of those expansion slots, one of those cartridges was a Rumble pack. So for certain games, if it supported this Rumble pack, and you had the Rumble pack inserted, it would give you vibrations feedback, haptic feedback for if you were doing certain things. Good old Star Fox 64
good vibrations.
I'm not gonna lie, I haven't used I don't think I remember using the Rumble pack for mine. I had the transfer pack, which you would put for stuff like Mario Golf and namely Pokemon Stadium. Those two are like the big ones. And then there was also a memory pack that you could put in, and you could save like ghost data from Mario Kart 64 and other stuff like that couldn't be saved to the controller, or couldn't be saved to the cartridge itself. It had to be saved elsewhere, so they would put the expansion slot for the memory pack for that. But yeah, it had some cool ideas, but I think it definitely aged kind of weird, just because it has 3 prongs. Like, how do you hold that? Like, it's weird.
Yeah, the 64 like PS1 era was the era of you needed like memory cards and shit to save games.
Hey, you Pikachu, Mike.
We're not going to go over weird peripherals like that, unfortunately, but that was a thing that they came out with. I have a soft spot for the N64 controller, but if there's one criticism I really have more than anything, that analog stick, despite being the first console to have an analog stick packed into its controller, it's not great. It's very uncomfortable, and it's very rigid, and then after you've used it for a while, it goes the opposite direction, and it's scraping against the inside, and it becomes too loose, and it will often not be able to reset to its default position after using it for a long time. Anyone who's played Mario Party with these controllers probably knows the agony of having to twist, especially the first Mario Party, having to twist the analog stick in a circle.
It's only the first Mario Party.
Because they did a lot of mini games where you had to do that, and it left a lot of hand cramps.
Not just cramps, kids fucking cut their hands on that shit.
Yeah.
Bleed, bitch!
But was there anything else you guys wanted to say about the N64 controller?
Not really.
Before we move on?
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty badass.
I had a weird tendency to hold the left grip and outstretch my thumb to the stick and play entire games like that.
Oh, jeez. So, we'll move on to the next system, or the next controller rather, because this is actually a controller for an existing system we've already talked about, and that is the DualShock.
What?
We've got
the
DualShock 1, first of its kind, came out in late 1997 and in 1998 across different territories. And this was the controller that they would start packing the newer PS1 revision with, and a different color. And this was also a controller that was made mandatory for certain games. I remember Ape Escape was like the first big game where like you could not play the game without this controller. But basically what it adds over the regular Sony PlayStation controller is you've got the 2 analog sticks. They can actually be pressed in for an L3 or R3 button. So they weren't just sticks, they were also buttons. There was a button to turn off that analog stick. You might remember when I was on the 3D Pro, there was like a little switch. I'm not sure if that turned on or off the stick, or if it actually turned on the stick or the D-pad, because I think there might have been like a weird like thing where you had to toggle which one you were using. But with the DualShock, you have that button. If the light's on, then you have analog mode. If it's not, you're in digital mode.
Yeah, I actually don't have much. Well, actually, I don't have any experience with the not the original revision. I have a turbo controller version of it, but yeah, if the light was on, you could use the sticks.
Right.
If it wasn't, you were stuck on the D-pad.
Right, and that was basically so like for compatibility with previous games, because there's a lot of games that they came out with. You know, it's so that if you were playing older games that came out before the analog controller came out, you'd still be able to play those games with that controller by just turning the analog off. And then notably, as Justin mentioned earlier, we have bigger L and R buttons, L2, R2 on the back. Instead of them being the same shape and size as the L1 and R1 buttons, they became a little bit bigger. They basically took up the rest of the back of the little like part where your fingers can rest on the back of the controller.
There's a lot of negative space on the original controller.
This is not the DualShock 1, this is the DualShock 2, but it's extremely similar, and we're going to be getting there recently. But basically, what I'm talking about is if you're watching, they're basically, they cover the whole thing, whereas there's like only like half of that area covered by the previous controller.
Yeah.
This was a controller I had a ton of experience with. I owned a PlayStation. The family owned a PlayStation. I played stuff like Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, a lot of other games, all with that controller. So I have many, many hours logged in with the DualShock 1.
Yeah, this is back in the day where you actually had the option to turn on and off the analog sticks, because in the future you didn't get that option.
They're on by default nowadays. So, how do you guys feel about the DualShock?
Good.
I mean,
good.
It was a pretty successful design, and they kept using it, so I think it's pretty good.
Oh yeah, we'll see this going forward. Sony stuck with this for a while. They did not want to let this form factor and this whole stick go.
Yeah.
Landon's just creeping in the back. He's like just chilling.
Huh?
Although
with the ice cream
Sony makes cameras.
Do you have any experience with the original DualShock as a kid?
Me?
Yeah.
You. Oh, I mean, sure. I don't sure.
Landon is like so whatever about this like generation of controllers. He's like, sure, man, whatever.
He's like, we already did the best one.
Yeah.
He's like, we haven't gotten to the best one yet, in his opinion.
No, I mean, we already did the best one of this generation, which to him is the 64 controller.
True. You like the N64 controller that much, Landon? It's cool if you do.
Yeah, because I can play Paper Mario on this controller. Can I?
That's
can
fair.
I?
No, you
can
can't. You can't play Paper Mario with the DualShock.
So that piece of shit needs to get the fuck off this screen. Let's move on.
All right, so we're gonna move on, and the next controller is the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast came out about a year after the DualShock did in Japan. Although we wouldn't see the system for another year or so. But the Dreamcast is very. It was the first system of the 6th generation of consoles. Before the PlayStation 2, before the GameCube, before the Xbox. I did not experience the Dreamcast as it came out, but I did eventually get one. I do have a Dreamcast controller.
I have 8.
Fun
8?
Fun features about the Dreamcast controller. You've got L and R triggers. You've got an analog stick. You've got D-pad. You've got the start button at the bottom, which is triangular. You've got A, B, X, Y, although the A and B on the X and Y are swapped from where they were on the Super Nintendo. And this is actually the same thing that Microsoft would end up doing on their controller that would come out right after.
Thieves!
They stole this! This was Sega's idea first!
The Dreamcast controller is the first controller that has actual triggers.
Right. It's they're actually pretty comfortable. I think they hold up pretty well. Very interestingly, the Dreamcast controller also has not one, but 2 expansion slots. So they took a page from the N64's book, but they added a second one, and you can insert these VMUs, which were essentially memory cards. Should be worth noting that the PlayStation needed memory cards to save games. You couldn't because it uses disc-based stuff. So one thing that Sony would do is they'd have the memory cards in the console above the controller. Whereas if Nintendo, on the Nintendo 64, if you needed to save extra data, this was a similar feature where you would have something that would plug in here. The Dreamcast would do this too. So this was actually a pretty common thing. At the time, there were several companies that were doing systems that had this sort of thing. And then the weirdest thing about the controller, in my opinion, although quite a few people don't really mind it, is that the cord comes out of the bottom.
Worst fucking shit.
There is this little thing on the back though. You can just kind of tuck it into. And then it's good to go. And then you can.
You know what they could have done? Fucking just make it go through the goddamn top.
You know, I guess maybe they could have. I guess there's kind of space there, but there's not a whole lot of space on the back of the controller.
There's a whole bunch of fucking plastic.
True.
Right here. Just feed it through there.
True.
Come on. Come on, Sega, stop being cowards.
Well, unfortunately, Sega would be even more cowardly, in your opinion, because they just stopped making stopped making consoles after this. This is their last console.
It's because they put the fucking cord on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's because they put the cord on the bottom. That's really what killed the Dreamcast.
100% that's what killed Sega as console makers.
They put the cord on the bottom, that's why they're dead.
No, it wasn't the PS2.
I mean, I'm sure a couple of you guys have quite a bit of experience with the Dreamcast, so I'd like to hear your thoughts. Jack, if you want to talk about the Dreamcast controller and games you've played, I'm sure you've got quite a lot. Jet Set Radio?
Fucking solid controller. Missing a second stick.
Missing a second stick, yes.
But holds up, honestly. It's pretty comfy. It's got a good control stick, good D-pad, buttons are nice. It's got good triggers.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about the wire placement. So, yeah, it's fine.
The Dreamcast controller.
I like it.
It's pretty good. Justin, how do you feel about the controller?
Honestly, I feel like, I mean, I know it's not exactly the same, especially because there's a bit more of a dip in the back. But if you can get used to, like, the Xbox controller, like the Revision, not the Duke, I think the Dreamcast kind of feels somewhat similar to that, and it's pretty comfortable to me.
I agree.
Like, I think the roughest thing about it is that hard-ass, like, plastic thumbstick, but it's not really that bad.
My cats come to bug me. And then, Landon, have you shared all of your thoughts on the controller?
Man, you know, I love the buttons. I love the triggers. It has a really cool analog stick. I love where you can have the VMU in it.
That is cool.
0 out of 10 controller. Fucking put the goddamn cable through the goddamn top of your fucking controller.
So we got two people here who don't care for the controller's cord placement, and two people who do. For once, me and Landon are on the same
loves
page.
it. Jack loves where the controller or the cable's fucking placement is. He absolutely gets off on that.
What can I say?
But yeah, I do agree with Jack. I think that it is worth noting that the controller actually has very comfortable ergonomic grips for your hands, similar to the DualShock did, but you know, a little bit more differently designed. I think overall actually a little bit more better shaped for your hands. So yeah, no, it holds up surprisingly well, I would say. If we don't have anything else to share, we'll move on to the next one, which is going to be pretty quick because it's the DualShock 2. It is one of the most iconic controllers for one of the most iconic game consoles of all time, and it's literally just the DualShock 1, except now these buttons are pressure sensitive, so if you press them really hard, they do more things, apparently. Very few games would actually use this. You don't really need it.
Yeah, I think it was just platformers.
I think I heard GTA.
Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3. Fighting games, there was a couple that experimented with it. The Bouncer was a game that used it.
Oh yeah, You know, I'm glad Jack said that because I did forget about that. If you just mash the square button, you just like aim. But if you like held it down, you would like run and shoot.
Right.
Yeah.
And like how hard you pressed on it, it would like basically like have the game do something different for it. Pressure sensitive buttons were something that would stick around for a couple of generations, but they eventually went away after a while. But worth noting is that the DualShock 2, because it basically has everything from the DualShock 1 and then just that one extra thing, are actually cross-compatible with the DualShock 1. You could use DualShock 1 on PS2, you can use DualShock 2 on PS1. It is one of the few pairs of systems and pairs of controllers that does this. We'll get to another set of systems and controllers that do the same later on. But yeah, interesting to know. They are cross-compatible. We talked a lot about the DualShock though. It was pretty revolutionary for its time. You had Rumble built in with the DualShock 1. I forgot to mention that. That's why it's called DualShock, because Rumble features. But DualShock 2 basically did all the same things. The next controller, the next system that would come out though, would be this controversial piece of plastic, which was known as the Duke.
The Duke!
For the Xbox. I've used this controller before. Interesting things to note about it. It had your ABXY similar to the Dreamcast. It had L&R triggers similar to the Dreamcast. But it also had black and white buttons. The black and white, as well as the A, B, and XY, are pressure sensitive, just like the X, circle, triangle, and square on the DualShock. It's the first controller that had two sticks that were in offset positions, which is something pretty commonly used in controllers nowadays, except if you're Sony or Google. A lot of third-party controllers, a lot of first-party controllers for a couple of systems, they have this design where there's one stick up near the top on the left side and one stick down below the buttons on the right-hand side. There's a couple outliers. The Wii U also is not something that conforms to this, but quite a lot of controllers would use this method. The problem is that the thing is huge. Like, the thing is really massive. And it only lasted for like a year or so before being replaced because of this. But I have used it. I have used this thing before. The D-pad on it is very weird. It's a weird like circular ripple that's like subtle.
Blob.
Yeah, it looks like it's like subtly indifferent. It looks like the blob from the opening sequence when you boot up the Xbox and it's got like the little warping green blob. Like I think that's something that we're going for. I don't know. It's
a half-cooked egg.
It's a half-cooked egg. It's hard to tell from the picture, but like the Dreamcast, it does have two expansion slots on the back, although they weren't really used a whole lot because the Xbox has built-in memory, so you could just save to the Xbox hard drive. You didn't need to have these little like expansion slots. If anybody knows what these expansion slots were used for, we'd be glad to hear it in the comments on YouTube, or if you join our Discord and you'd like to talk about these things more, you're welcome to join that as well. Yeah, I used it. It was definitely too big for my hands. My hands are not big. My hands are pretty small, so they were very uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, it was too small.
Leave it to Landon.
I have big ass.
You got giant
hands. Oh, I have big ass man hands, and this thing is still annoying to use.
Jack, you have any thoughts?
This thing's fucking hideous.
Damn, just going right for it.
So like a 8 out of 10?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, one of the weirdest things about the controller is that the sticks are not even like universal. One has like a dip in it. The other one is like a knob.
Yeah, so one of them is concave, so it has like that design where it's kind of like the X and Y on the SNES controller. They go inward so that they can guide your finger. The other one, it's kind of concave, but it's only like a little bit near the top, so it might as well just be a convex stick. It's really weird. But this is the first and only time they did that. They would move on to a controller that's a lot more similar to what we would see with controllers nowadays. So I guess we're just going to move on to, I'm sure this is a favorite of Jack's, the GameCube controller.
The GameCube.
The GameCube.
The girls' room.
The GameCube controller is very... nowadays, it's a lot of people really love this thing. You have two sticks. One of them, they converted the C buttons from the N64 into a stick, so it's actually a second stick. You have L and R triggers. I actually have one of my own controllers. This one actually was gifted to me by Jack many years ago. It's a Japanese. It is Japanese only version of the Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and GameCube controller. So on the GameCube controller, you have L and R triggers. More on these later. You have a Z button, which is basically where the L and R buttons kind of are on the PS2's DualShock. You have a start button in the middle. You've got one of the interesting things about the GameCube is the A, B, and X, Y. They're not designed in any way like any other controller. They have the A button is massive in the middle for your main button. B button, which is usually your cancel button, is a lot smaller and a little off to the side. And then the Y and X buttons are these bean-shaped buttons kind of hovering right off the side of the A button. So you'd have this idea where you'd have your thumb mostly on the A button, and then you could pivot to the other buttons as needed. And then the L and R, interestingly, they're analog triggers, but if you press all the way down, you get a click, because it is a button, but you can also have a trigger all the way down until you hit that button. Very unique design, very unique controller.
Yeah, this is probably my most played with Nintendo controller of all time.
It's still supported to this day. Like, this Nintendo Switch has a USB adapter. You can plug that USB adapter in and plug your GameCube controller and play Switch games with
I have the same orange
controller. Jack,
but mine
you've got an
is orange and white.
That's a really cool design.
I've had this for a long time. I don't know, like 9 years.
Wow.
So
I still have my original. I didn't bring it with. I got up to get this one because this is the main one I use. But I still have my original from box GameCube controller.
Oh wow.
That I got for Christmas in 2002, and it still works.
I still have mine too as well.
The GameCube controller is honestly the first controller where it wasn't just some boring ass gray or black color. It was actually purple.
Out of the box, yes. And it is worth noting we did not mention this, so thank you for bringing it up. But the previous generation with the N64 and then the DualShock as well. This is when the console manufacturers started kind of giving you a lot of different color options. Like N64, you could get clear ones, orange, green, blue, red, whatever. And they did the same thing with the GameCube, but they actually packed in purple ones originally with the purple launch of the console. Then there'd be a silver version, and there was an orange version. So they had different consoles and matching controllers for the GameCube, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah. What GameCube did you guys have?
I had a purple one, and I had originally I had just a pure indigo controller, and then I got the half indigo, half clear one.
Solid.
I still have that half indigo, half clear one too. Although it is, I put it aside because I wanted to show off the Smash one.
Well, I mean, the clear controllers were happening as early as the 64, but there was a lot of people that had those. I don't really know what the fad was.
It was just a visual thing. Like, people just liked to see the insides of the controller with the clear. It was just a cool aesthetic.
Yeah.
Al says
purple one that got broke while playing SADX, and then got a silver one.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of us have played GameCube. A lot of us have used this GameCube controller. Very popular. Jack, how do you feel about the GameCube controller?
I've probably used this controller, not this controller specifically, but the GameCube controller more than any controller ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say. Just based on total playtime. Yeah. I love this controller. I mean, the D-pad is kind of small, but it's hardly used for anything.
Yeah.
And the C-stick is, I mean,
it works.
Fine. I like it. It works. But I mean, in terms of feel and grip, and the button placement, I don't know. I feel like it's been surpassed, but it's top 5.
Yeah, for its time, it was really good. Justin, how do you feel about the GameCube controller? You have experience with it.
Oh yeah, this is not only my most played Nintendo console like ever, but like this was a time where I was actually really active across like everything. Like I was playing the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox like pretty much at the same time.
Right, me too.
And I think I was actually playing the GameCube more than both of them actually, which is strange. But
Oh no, I was gonna say I had more experience with the PS2, but I definitely had a lot of experience with the GameCube as well. But go on.
Yeah, I definitely think like this was where I think man, can I say I think anymore? This was the controller that Nintendo really nailed it for me. Like it was really comfortable. I've heard some people sometimes like bump their fingers on like the backs of where like the D-pad and the C-stick are, but I didn't really have that problem. I don't know what they were doing. And I think aren't the you said the L and R buttons are like pressure sensitive, like
so they're triggers, but then if you press them down all the way, they have a digital button at the bottom, at the back. It's really weird. They're like a mix of analog and digital.
Yeah, I think I got the most out of that playing Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah, I haven't played Luigi's Mansion. My biggest experience with that aspect of the buttons is with Super Smash Bros. Melee, because you could like light shield if you just held it down a little bit, and then if you press it down all the way, you could press it down to dodge. If you only had it like halfway, you'd have like the larger shield.
Yeah.
Landon, what about you? What say you about the GameCube controller?
Oh, it's fine. It's too popular, so I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. People like using it for some reason, and it's a weird-looking fucking croissant for sure. So
it is extremely popular. Like I said,
it's hard to hold it through the middle. Like I hold most of my controllers, so I don't know. Yeah, 3 out of 10. Feels
Landon
nice.
does this every time, by the way. This is an every Gaming Stooges Talks Landon thing.
What?
Well, yeah, I think part of the proof that this is Nintendo's most successful controller is the fact that they keep fucking retroactively supporting it.
Yeah, I mean, it is all of the Wii models for like the first few years had GameCube support built in, so you could use GameCube controllers, and a lot of Wii games supported the GameCube controller. The Wii U would come out with an adapter so you could play with the GameCube controller for Smash Brothers. And then the Switch, you can use either the Wii U one or just the one that they came out with later for the Switch, the adapter to play any game with the GameCube controller. It just operates as a USB controller. So you can still use a GameCube controller to this day to play current gen games. Will it work 100%?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Depends on the game. You know, there might be games where they need that extra shoulder button and you just don't have it. But you can technically...
Still works.
It still works. We're gonna move on to the next one though. The next...
Landon, did you see Al's comment?
Want Landon to grow his beard longer and start keeping a lighter around? he wants
that lighter.
He wants Landon to just be Blaze the best. Go watch the Ace Attorney VODs.
Go watch the great Ace Attorney VODs.
Uh-oh.
Now he's back.
So yeah, the next controller that we would see would be a revision to the Xbox controller. This is the Xbox Controller S. It is much more ergonomically designed than the Xbox's original controller that we call the Duke. They did reposition the white and black buttons to be more below the ABXY, and they did reposition the start and back buttons to be over on the underneath the other stick. But you'll see that the sticks are both concave. The D-pad is more traditionally a D-pad, and it's got more like it's got some more rounded handles to put your grip around, and notably much smaller. It is not Xbox huge.
Yeah,
I think this is a great controller, honestly.
Yeah, they fixed it.
The Duke sucks ass, but like this one is pretty good.
I have to dock some points though. It doesn't hurt as much when you hit somebody with it.
You can't use it as a weapon as well, so that's points off for that.
It's bludgeoning score. It has decrease, so I give it a 5 out of 10.
They had the D-pad right on this one. How did they fuck it up on the next one? We'll get to that. But the D-pad on this one is fine. Like, it functions perfectly well for both what you need it to and just, like, if you need to play... I can't even think of a game that would primarily use the D-pad on the original Xbox, but, like, I imagine it could be used for that in a reliable way.
I'm trying to think, the Xbox had... No, the Xbox didn't even get a whole lot of fighting games, because a lot of fighting games were on the
GameCube.
Well, there was Dead or Alive.
Yeah. That's true. Did Soul Calibur come to the Xbox?
Yeah, because they had that Spawn thing, didn't they?
Is that the lighter that I got from the dispensary?
It is. And nice. I'm not turning it around because it has their branding on the other side.
Yeah, probably don't want to do that.
No free rides on this channel.
No free rides on this channel.
Unless you're fucking Taco Bell.
Yeah, only Taco Bell.
We will give a free ride to Taco Bell any day of the week.
So yeah, the controller S, short and sweet. It took the Duke and it made it good. And this controller notably basically informs a lot of Xbox's future controllers. So, I mean, pretty important milestone for Xbox, I would say. The next controller that came out, same year as the Xbox Controller S. We don't have exact dates for either of these. They both came out in 2002. But the Wavebird for the Nintendo GameCube, notably the first major first-party controller to be wireless. That's a big thing, because going forward, every controller that we're going to talk about is by default wireless. This is the controller that started that. So
it's true. Yeah. I remember. You go first.
Oh, I was just gonna say I didn't have this controller, but I did have a friend that did have this controller. I remember the bottom port just being really bulky.
But it's not it's not overly it's not heavy.
No,
and it's still
just a little big on the bottom.
Yeah. What did you want to say, Zach?
I vividly remember a time and being a kid and. Like, wireless controllers were, like, the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because, like, every controller up to this point was wired. And, like, you know, aside from the Wavebird, they were always third-party. I never had a Wavebird, actually. When I was a kid, I got I think it's a Pelican?
The brand. Pelican was a brand. Now,
I had a wireless Pelican controller. And it died quicker than any controller I've ever used in my life. It lasted less than a year.
I want to mention, in case anyone is listening to this, you'll notice I've only been talking about first-party stuff. Yes, it is worth noting that a lot of third parties, especially more and more as time goes on, would make their own versions of controllers to be used for these different consoles. This generation really exploded with third-party controller support and peripheral support. But it's worth noting that we're mostly sticking to just the first-party stuff. So none of those Mad Cats, none of the Pelicans, none of the GameStop cheapo GameCube.
Oh, I hate the GameStop ones.
With the really uncomfortable grips. Like, we're not going to talk about those. But it's worth mentioning they're out there and they exist.
This shit.
That thing. Oh, I remember that thing.
I'm sorry, I can only hear you.
Oh yeah, if you're listening to the podcast version of this, just the audio only, Jack showed us a picture of a.
If you're in our Discord, I'm about to send it to our Discord.
So you can check our Discord.
I have the GameStop PS2 controller, which is like a fucking mini controller for my fucking giant ass hands. So that was awful.
Landon, any thoughts on the Wavebird for GameCube?
It would be cool if they did a Wavebird version of the Resident Evil 4 controller.
Yeah!
Oh,
hell yeah.
So...
The fucking chainsaw?
Yeah, with the chainsaw in the middle.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The whole thing in the middle. The whole thing was the chainsaw.
What about the PSO GameCube? Oh, that's the one that that's the one that people will bring to Smash tournaments too, right?
Hell yeah.
God, it's like this long version that's literally the GameCube controller with a keyboard in the middle.
Hell yeah.
2 badass controllers that they should have made Wavebird versions of.
True.
So, missed opportunities there. 0 out of 10.
Fucking A.
But yeah, I do want to mention that the GameCube controller, or the Wavebird for GameCube, it might be a controller that came out afterwards, kind of like the DualShock, but it is as revolutionary as the DualShock for the simple fact that it's wireless. And this is big because it's like I said, we're gonna move on. Next controller, everything from here on out by default is wireless, starting with the Xbox 360. The Xbox 360. Is wireless, operated by AA batteries, to be fair, which is a thing that another controller for this period would end up using. It's pretty much extremely similar to the Landon and Jack are holding theirs right now. It's extremely similar to the Xbox Controller S, but instead of using the white and black buttons, they just have left and right bumpers, so they actually have a second set of shoulder buttons with their triggers like the Sony controllers would have. And they have the start and back where they were on the regular Xbox, although they're a lot closer. They're more towards the top instead of being on the bottom. But the one major addition that the Xbox 360 controller had was the Xbox button. I don't know what it's exactly named, but it is the button that brings you to the hub, because from here on out, game consoles would have their own home UI where you would navigate to your different games and settings and stuff like that, which mandates that a controller needs a button to go back to that. Yeah. Xbox 360 was the first controller to do that, so it had the foresight that you'd need a button to specifically go back to that hub when needed. But other than that, there's not a lot to say, but that's not a bad thing. This is a really, really nice controller. I don't have one with me right now, but it is super comfortable. It's got all the right inputs. The D-pad's a little, I mean, like Jack said. I mean, I'll let you say it.
Yeah. Listen, this would be the perfect video game controller if the D-pad wasn't total dog shit. Yeah. This thing fucking sucks. Like everything else about this controller, like the weight to it, the shoulder buttons, the triggers are super smooth.
The grips.
Like the sticks are like perfect. The D-pad sucks ass though. It's the one bad thing about an otherwise flawless controller.
Yeah.
But like the GameCube, there aren't a whole lot of games that actually primarily use it. Like, I think the only thing I can think of that would be like Super Meat Boy.
Street Fighter 4.
That too. Yeah, no,
the Gears of War series uses it to switch weapons.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, is like any like first-person shooter or like any, I don't know, the D-pad is always just like either switch gears or switch weapons.
Yeah,
or
so it's nothing like major.
Clubs. Yeah, it's not like major direct control of your character.
But fighting games are definitely, they took a little bit of a hit on the 360 because of that D-pad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Justin, what do you have to say about the 360 controller?
I mean, like Jack said with the D-pad, other than that, I think this controller is probably one of the best I've ever used. Like, it fits perfectly in my hand. It's, they didn't decide to do the Duke mistake again. They just kind of followed up on the revision controller that they made previously, and they just kind of touched up on it. I guess they thought the black and white buttons just kind of sitting on the front of the controller was like, maybe there was too much going on there, so I don't mind that change at all.
Yeah. No, I'm glad they finally added just the second set of shoulder buttons, just because, yeah, like Jack said, it's almost flawless.
Yeah.
Landon, how do you feel about the 360 controller?
Yeah.
He's like taking a deep breath. He's like,
what will Landon say?
What will Landon say? Have you ever had to clean controllers for a living?
Oh boy!
Oh no!
I hear this.
I mean, that's just it. Like, I mean, obviously, some of the other controllers we've talked about, you know, fucking get that
Have
shit.
hand grime.
But it's that fucking the fucking, you know.
Yeah, the spot where it's like the crack in between the two halves of the controller casing.
Microsoft, go fuck yourself.
To be fair, the GameCube controller has that too. So
yeah, like I said, other controllers have had that. It is a thing, but you know, this is one.
It's a personal vendetta.
Listen, it's the I think I know where you're going.
It's the other one thing wrong with the controller.
True. But like, there's also the fact that like everyone and their grandmother had a fucking 360. Well,
not everyone's grandmother had one.
If you lived in North America, specifically the United States, everybody
in North America, if you were like us and grew up in the late aughts, in like middle and high school, everyone had a fucking 360. So like every gross ass kid you can think of with like hand grease and sweat.
Yep.
And Cheeto dust.
Yeah. This was when, like, the meme where, like, you know, Cheeto dust on the controller was, like, a thing. It is worth noting this, while the pack-in version was a wireless controller, they did make an identical wired version of these controllers that you could buy for a cheaper value. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was like $20 off or so if you got the wired version. The wireless version I think was like $50, and I think that the wired version was like $25 or $30. But basically, if you couldn't afford the extra for the wireless, they had a wired option, and it had like an input that you'd plug in, and otherwise it was the same thing, just wired. But you'd have the same comfortable grip, everything.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, everything I hate about this controller, the 360 controller, goes on with everything I hate with their future controllers too. Microsoft, you can make it recharge, like a rechargeable battery in your fucking controllers.
Yeah, in fairness, even now with the Xbox Series X, the controllers do not come with a rechargeable battery. This is
by default.
This is not something that would be standardized with Microsoft. They just don't do this. The other two companies would do this, where they have built-in batteries.
I wonder if Microsoft has a deal with like Duracell or something.
So their argument is, and I get it. Their argument is, and a lot of people who love Xbox will defend this point. I don't really like it, but I get it. It's so that in case the batteries die, you just get new ones. With like for example, one of the next controllers we're going to talk about is the PlayStation 3. The battery dies in this, you gotta either open up the controller and know how to replace the battery that way, or you need a new controller. And that's just how that is.
Most people just break their controllers before batteries die in them. So
fair,
yeah.
But that was their argument, is that if you take good care of your controller, instead of having to worry, you just don't have to worry about the battery dying and having to replace the whole controller, because you could just get new batteries. And a lot of third-party companies and Microsoft themselves would make rechargeable battery packs, but you have to buy those separately.
Yeah, Microsoft just wants an extra $25, so
Big Battery is in cahoots with Microsoft.
Big Battery.
I actually was in the camp of why recharge your controller when you could, put new batteries in it. But then when you look at it logistically, it's actually a waste of money, because it's like, why not just get a rechargeable you can buy once and then recharge infinitely?
Yeah, fair. It's one of those things where like the controller in the long run will last better because of the replaceable batteries, but in the short term, it's so much more expensive.
My counterpoint to Microsoft's battery shit is that why not just like have a removable rechargeable battery?
Yeah, like I don't know why they don't do that.
And when it if it dies, you can just replace it.
That's what it is, but it just doesn't come with it when you buy the system.
Right.
So that's all they really need to do, is just do that, and then I will hate them
slightly less.
Just a tiny, the tiniest crumb less.
Well, I think in the next era, I think Microsoft kind of learned from the other two that, maybe we should just have rechargeables as default.
Not entirely, but we'll get there. So the next system that came out, these are within the same week, so I might have mixed them up by accident, but we'll talk about the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, which came with the Wii. This is a unique thingy.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
If you know us well, we're gonna make this joke, we're gonna say it. The Wii won! Get over it.
Get over it.
So, the Wii Remote and Nunchuck are very unique in that they have, you have two components, and these both come with the system when you get them. You can buy either one individually separately at the time. The Wii Remote has the D-pad up at the top, you've got an A button beneath that, you have what are now plus and minus, which are your start and select. You've got 1 and 2 on the front, which are for action buttons. More on this later. There's a B button that's trigger shaped on the back. And then there's a home button, so just like the Microsoft's Xbox, you've got the button that goes back to the menu. And then the Nunchuck complements it and has a C button, a Z button, and an analog stick. And it plugs into the Wii Remote on the bottom. You can also plug other things into the Wii Remote on the bottom. I'm going to be mentioning a controller that came out at the same time that we'll get on. But interesting things about the Wii Remote is it could be used by itself. It could be used just like a remote. It could be used sideways like a controller, like the old NES style controllers. And then of course you could plug in the Nunchuck and you could play with both the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck. The Wii Remote was known for being a motion controller. You move the Wii Remote around, you shake the Wii Remote, you do certain things with the motion on the screen in your game. And this was something that revolutionized.
That's another thing that would be present in every controller.
That Nintendo, for Nintendo at least, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about Microsoft's Xbox controllers. I don't think they do that. Maybe in a limited capacity. But yeah, Nintendo revolutionized the game with this controller. Even it's quirky, it's very weird, but we can't deny.
It's quirky XD.
It's you can't deny that the adding motion controls. Nintendo still uses this 3 generations in. Like it works.
Cloud, your Wiimote is naked.
Well, my Wii Remote is naked. I don't have the jacket, unfortunately.
You don't have the condom.
Yeah, well, go get yourself a condom. Protection first, folks.
Later on, they would release a thing called Motion Plus, which would plug into the Wii Remote, and then they would eventually just make Wii Remotes with Motion Plus built into them, which was basically just to fine-tune the motion control, make it more reliable. But before we get on the other controller that you could get alongside the Wii's release, how about we talk about
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Jack, Wii Remote Nunchuck.
Okay, so I like to dick ride the Wii because it's like one of my favorite systems, if not my favorite system. But like, I genuinely think that the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, or even just the Wii Remote by itself, for what it is, like for what it's trying to do, like works perfectly in any game that you're playing. Like, I mean, is the motion perfect in any game? No, but like, in terms of like the actual button layout and, you know, everything else, the fucking, you could turn it on its side for fucking 2D platformers, you could point it like a gun, swing it like a sword. This is cool as shit. I think this is great. It's very, like, if the controls in a Wii game are bad, that's the developer's fault.
That's the game's
fault, not the controller's fault.
I agree.
Question. The Nunchuck has, like, this little plastic ridge, like, on the bottom of the thing.
Yes.
It's meant to put, like, the fucking... the safety strap, the wrist strap, through. Did anyone ever use that?
No.
I remember seeing like that in the fucking tutorial.
I always forgot
for the
to put
Wii.
it on.
Yeah, no, like it's just inconvenient. Like, why would anyone use it?
I mean, there was people that were throwing their Wii remotes into TVs, so
I mean, yeah.
There's people that probably should have been using it.
I'm not talking about the strap itself.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the piece of plastic underneath the nunchuck.
Yeah, no, I didn't use it. I didn't use it.
Yeah, because odds are if you're using the Wii remote and nunchuck, even if you're doing some like violent thrusts with your goddamn right hand or left hand if you're left-handed, like even if it flings from your hand, you're still holding onto the nunchuck because there's no motion in this one.
Right.
Actually, wait, is there?
I believe there is.
Yeah, because I know the Mario and Sonic games use the nunchuck. You got to move it.
Oh,
and there's games that you have to like do this like thing where like you're like drumming with both. But I don't know if it's because the nunchuck itself has it or if the Wii can feel the nunchuck moving.
Okay, but I thought of something. I remember when Sonic Colors was first revealed, like the reveal trailer, and they showed off Sonic like drifting. In like the early beta or like I don't know whatever, you tilted the nunchuck to drift.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
So
they
took that out. They took that out because it was a fucking terrible idea.
Yeah.
But
Isn't there like shield bashing in Twilight Princess?
Yeah, there is. It's been a while.
I mean, there's when you're like boxing.
I know.
Wii boxing.
I brain farted.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna make this quick.
Yeah.
Probably second tier controller. Only because God made a better controller after this. But
my cat is bugging me.
If I can play an RPG with my arms crossed, then I'm playing. Fuck off.
Yeah, no, I get what Landon's saying.
Playing Arc Rise.
I like what Landon's saying.
Rise.
Yep.
I'm playing Xenoblade, bitch.
You could play a video game like this.
Yep.
With your arm behind your head if you're only listening and not viewing.
Now, this is not the only controller that can do this because we'll get to that later, but this is definitely a comfortable controller. I agree with Jack. For what it does it surprisingly well, and I think that's why it got so popular, is because it's simple, it works, it does its job exactly as it's intended. Thumbs up. Justin, how do you feel about the Wii Remote and Nunchuck? I mean, you've used it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think its minimal approach is one of the reasons why it's so easy to use. But honestly, I feel like if you don't know how to use like a TV remote at this point,
yeah,
you might be Amish or something.
Yeah,
you just don't use technology.
Right. So like, if you've used the TV, you probably know how to use this controller. So
yeah,
that's why literally everyone and their grandmother had a Wii and knew how to play Wii bowling.
Yep. So yeah, Wii Remote Nunchuck, very, very prominent controller. Alongside the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, released right around the same time, you could get this other controller that you could plug into the Wii Remote, which was the Classic controller. I have mine. The Classic controller came in a couple different versions. But I'm only going to really talk about the first version. We'll make a small note of the other ones. But basically, the Classic controller would plug into your Wii Remote. So you still had to have your Wii Remote. But it has the controller in a much more, classic orientation. It's got the L and R, pretty similar to the Super Nintendo's controller. You have your A, B, X, Y back again. They're lined up just the same.
The wires on the bottom.
The wires on the bottom, like the Dreamcast, yep. It does have the ZL and ZR.
The difference is
it feeds into your controller.
It plugs into the Wiimote, and the Wiimote isn't always directly in front of me. So it can have a slight pass.
So yeah, the
slight pass.
The controller has like the D-pad, you've got the A, B, X, Y, start and selector in the middle, plus and minus, but they're labeled start and select as well. You got your home button, the two sticks are down near the bottom. Not dissimilar to it's kind of like a fusion of like the Super Nintendo controller shape-wise and the DualShock layout-wise. So you have all of your functions there. Not every game supported this configuration, but for those that did, if you had standard games, you could play this controller with this. They would release a Classic Controller Pro around the time, a little bit after, which basically added grip, separated the two sticks a little bit, made the ZL and ZR bigger. Instead of them being just tiny little circles, they actually were full shoulder buttons. But, I mean, otherwise, they were basically... You know, you had a nice standard controller that plugged into your Wii remote, and it played like a standard controller, and I like it. It's really nice. They would basically keep iterating on this design for their quote-unquote classic or pro-style controllers for the other systems, which would, again, just like this one, would not be the main controller, but like an optional controller you could use. And we'll talk about the other ones when we get there. I see Jack's got his black... Classic controller.
Yes, I have the Classic Controller Pro.
Nice.
With handles and 2 sets of shoulder buttons. Actually, do they both
have
two
They both have 2 sets
buttons?
of shoulder buttons, but
okay.
the Z buttons on the regular Classic Controller are these little dots next to the L and R.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of being
it has
full shoulder buttons. Yeah. So, if you're watching the VOD, he's showing you with the camera.
Yeah.
But, yeah, how do we feel about the Classic Controller? Probably just some brief thoughts, I'm guessing.
I have no experience with the original Classic Controller, but this, I like. It's not the best controller I've ever used, but it plays Xenoblade, it plays Cave Story. That's all I really need.
I think the D-pad's on it's pretty good.
Yeah, solid. Not the best I've ever used, but solid.
Justin, do you have any thoughts on the Classic Controller, or did you not really have experience with it?
A lot of the Wii peripherals I just never ended up having.
Okay, that's fair. And Landon, anything you want to add?
No, it smelled.
It smelled.
I will say, and it looks like it's more of an issue on the original too. Like, even on this one, I think the sticks are a little close together.
Yeah.
But otherwise...
It's not enough of a croissant for the original, and it's too much of a croissant with
on the Pro.
So, gotta find that middle ground.
All right. We're going to move on to the next system, which I'm going to kind of crunch the two versions of this controller together because they're very similar. But we had the 6-axis and later the DualShock 3 for the PlayStation 3. Basically, it's just the DualShock 2, but they changed the L2 and R2 to these little triggers, but they're still shaped and formatted the same way that they were on the PS2. So you still have that weird shape. And for some reason, they're kind of hanging out of the controller, so they can kind of get pressed on a little too easily, I think. But just like the other two major controllers from Nintendo and Xbox, you have a new hub button with the PlayStation button. You got the triangle, circles, X, square, just like you did on the other controllers. Same D-pad, same analog sticks. 6-axis added some motion control. It's not nearly as fine-tuned as the Wii. It doesn't have as much detail, but it's got some control to it. The reason why it wasn't originally released as the DualShock 3 is because at the time, Sony had a lawsuit going on with Immersion. Immersion was trying to claim copyright over the Rumble feature that the DualShock was known for having. They couldn't put the controller out in time as DualShock 3. They had to take the Rumble out. They named it 6-axis. Then they came out the very next year, 2007, and they added the Rumble back. They named it DualShock 3, but it has the 6-axis motion support, so you'll see on the controllers that they have both DualShock 3 and 6-axis on them. Notably, these controllers are extremely light.
Mm-hmm. They're pretty...
The one that lacks the rumble is like a fucking feather.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like even the DualShock 3 is super light. I'm holding it in my hand and this thing is light as hell. But
yeah.
The 6-axis is even lighter because there's no rumble inside the controller.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack. Share your thoughts.
This is the worst. This is probably the worst DualShock. And it's just because of the fucking triggers. They're kind of bad.
Yeah, I agree.
And like I know, like a lot of shooters on the PS3 will primarily use like L1 is aim and L2
excuse
me, L1 is aim and L2 or
R1.
R1 is aim.
R1.
R2 shoot or whatever.
L1 is aim, R1 is shoot instead of L2 and R2.
Yeah, they would actively avoid using those buttons
because they knew these are bad. These are pretty bad. Yeah, no. But otherwise it's fine. It's a good controller.
It's the DualShock 2. It just has these weird controllers, but it is wireless. And the Wii Remote...
Wireless, rechargeable.
Yeah, the Wii Remote was also operated by AA batteries. So this is actually the first major controller to have a built-in rechargeable battery. So this is something... This is worth noting, because a lot of controllers going forward, unless your name is Microsoft, would have rechargeable batteries. So, points for that. Justin, did you want to say anything about the DualShock 3 6-axis controller?
This was like, I think, the one system where I had like both Xbox was that too, but you know what I mean. But like the 6-axis was kind of weird because it's like, why is this controller so fucking light? It's like, was the rumble really that fucking heavy? It's like, Jesus. But like,
yeah, because they have to have like these weird, I don't know what they're called, but they're these weird pieces that clip two parts of the controller inside that shake, so they have a little bit of weight to them.
Yeah, but I mean,
rip boomerang controller, says Al. Yeah, we were originally gonna get a really ugly boomerang controller,
that one.
So I'm so glad they didn't do that.
Thank
you, Sony, for just sticking with what worked.
I said the PS1 sticks. The grips look a little longer, I think, just because of the absence of the sticks. But the boomerang controller was like fucking way too long.
Yeah, no, that thing is weird. But yeah, thankfully the DualShock 3 and DualShock 2 literally just it's the same. They're the same shape. Just one of them's wireless.
But they wouldn't actually change like the DNA of the DualShock controller until the PS4.
Right. Landon, you want to add anything about the PS3's DualShock 3 6-axis controller?
Probably the best triggers on a controller, but other than that, it's hot garbage.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, so we're gonna move on, and the next system is got what Landon is going to tell you is the best controller. Ready?
Oh no!
Wii U gamepad.
I'm not saying it's the best controller. I'm saying it's God's controller.
God's controller. So the Wii U gamepad. Before we get into it, this thing is a feature-packed behemoth. You have two sticks which are up on the top of the controller. You've got your ABXY returning from the Super Nintendo and the GameCube back in the form factor of the Super Nintendo. You've got LR. You've got ZL, ZR back from the classic controller. You've got your plus and minus. You've got a home button. You've got a D-pad returning. And then you have a lot of other crap. There is a big touch capacitive screen that you could use for displaying extra information or for off-screen play. You could play it off the TV and just have your game on the screen there. It also had a headphone jack. This is actually kind of big because it wasn't common for controllers to have a headphone jack at the time. The Wii U gamepad just has a headphone jack, so that's worth noting. It has gyroscopic motion control, so you could, you still had the stuff with the Wii where you could use the gamepad, move it around. Had a built-in microphone, which a couple other controllers later on would have, so that's also worth noting. Yeah, this thing has a lot of stuff in it. It's very weird. It also has like an NFC reader. It's got so much stuff in it.
It's God's controller.
It's God's controller.
It even has,
like Landon said,
it even has a little button that lets you swap to TV remote mode and use it as an actual remote for your TV. One notable downside, though, of this controller, the battery life is so bad. Like, it's
absolute.
It's the one thing I don't like about it. Like this thing looks like it's uncomfortable. It's not. It has ergonomic grips on the backside. It's actually really comfortable. The battery life is just so bad because it has all of this stuff in it. It's like you have 3 to 4 hours of battery life. That's it. You're basically tethering this thing to its charger.
Or if you have had your jam pad, as we call it, for a long time, and you've charged it a lot, it's much less than that.
Really? I haven't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, goodness.
My gamepad lasts maybe 2 hours at most.
I think it's something to do with overcharging kills the battery.
Yeah, well, it's just a thing with controllers and anything with a battery.
Yeah, that's just how rechargeable batteries work. Is you're never going to.
Well,
they deteriorate over time.
But it was already bad to begin with, and now it's worse. The
Wii U gamepad, it's, in my opinion, it's not the worst controller. It is definitely comfortable. It's got a lot of good design features to it. But that is the one pain factor. It is literally the worst battery life of any controller that we're talking about today that has a built-in battery. It's so bad. Jack, did you want to talk about the Wii U gamepad? Who is Jampad?
Who is Jampad? We'll never fucking know. Jampad it's good. I like it. It's not like... It's not... I think it's best used when it's, like, assisting another controller. And I say that, like, for example, Pikmin 3, the best way to play that game is with a Wii Remote and nunchuck, and then having the gamepad in your lap as a map screen. And, like, for that, it is excellent. As a regular controller, it's good. I don't dislike it. I used it for Splatoon for like 175 hours or some bullshit. I don't know, because the fucking... Which we'll get to, I assume. The Wii U Pro Controller doesn't have motion control in it, so...
Oh yeah, we'll be talking about that.
Have to use the
next.
jam pad. But, yeah.
The Wii U gamepad... Jack mentioned it. It is really nice to be able to use that motion control for certain games like Splatoon. You haven't played Splatoon properly if you're not using the motion control with that. It works surprisingly well. One thing I like to do is I like to have a streaming app on my TV, and I would actually use the screen on the gamepad to play my Wii U game while I'm watching TV. So I liked being able to use the off TV play feature of the gamepad. I thought that was pretty neat. But basically, I've said everything else that I want to say about it. Justin, what did you want to add about the gamepad?
I actually did initially think that it looked kind of dumb, but I think it's just like a thing versus you looking at it versus actually using it.
Right.
Because actually it's pretty nicely in my big fat hands, so it's it's not hard to hold on to. And I like the little screen in the middle because it allows you to do certain things that sometimes you need an extra window for, unlike other consoles. So it's got a lot of utility for it. It's just it just kind of sucks the Wii U didn't really do as good as they wanted it to.
I have a question. Do you guys remember when the Wii U was first revealed in E3 2012?
Yeah,
it didn't have control sticks. It had
the circle pads that the 3DS used. Yup, I remember it.
3DS.
Yup.
That
was a prototype.
That probably would have been bad if it released like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad they just stuck with the sticks that they had for the Wii Remote nunchuck and just spiffied them up.
I like that Nintendo doesn't always follow industry standards for control design. It's something to get a little bit too eccentric.
Oh yeah. Landon, did you want to add anything about the Wii U gamepad?
God made it perfect. I don't know what you're talking about. When God himself, or herself, or their self, made the Wii U gamepad, flawless.
Anyway.
So yeah, we're gonna move on. Also released alongside the Wii U as a optional side controller you could use because it doesn't have all the features, so you can't use it the same way. Was the Wii U Pro controller, and the Wii U Pro controller basically takes. You don't have the screen, so you can't play off the TV with it. They basically took the form factor of the Wii U gamepad, just shrunk it down to a regular controller. One thing about this controller is for some reason it has an 80-hour battery life.
What the fuck?
That thing is insanely packed with its battery.
It has the opposite problem of the gamepad. This thing will last for
forever.
A long fucking time.
Yeah. Satan themselves made this controller.
Hell yeah.
Unfortunately, the
Satan.
Wii U Pro Controller, like Jack was mentioning, it doesn't have all the same features as the gamepad. It does not have motion control. To my knowledge, you usually cannot wake the Wii U up out of sleep with the Wii U Pro Controller, at least in my experience. I couldn't.
I don't remember if you can or not, actually. It's been a long time since I've actually used this.
I remember if I was turning on my Wii U, I always had to use the gamepad. I couldn't use the Wii U Pro Controller. But other than that, I use the Wii U Pro Controller a lot more than I use the gamepad, only because the gamepad just had that bad battery life. I think overall as a controller, the gamepad is probably better just because of all the features it has. But the Pro Controller just feels really nice. Like, I know a lot of people find it weird that both the sticks are up at the top, so the A, B, X, Y are actually down near the bottom. And that is weird. Like, that's the only controller that does this.
I mean, the gamepad does.
Well, besides the gamepad. But it's the only, like, standard controller design that has
standard croissant controller.
Yes. We'll call them croissant controllers. It's the only
croissants and rectangles
that does that. It's very weird. But I thought it was really comfortable. I loved that thing. It's weird, but I find it endearing.
I like it. It's definitely, like Cloud said, it's definitely missing features, and like it feels a little cheap, I guess. It's like not perfect, but I mean, for like casual playing of I'm trying to think of a game that you could use this with and not lose out on any features.
Mario Kart.
Yeah, Mario Kart.
Yeah, but I need to be able to see the track on my crotch, so...
Yeah, but how often are you looking down at your crotch during Mario Kart?
Landon does it all the time! I'm sure, Landon, you do it all the time.
Have you ever played Mario Kart with me in the same room?
No.
The answer is no, we didn't actually play Mario Kart.
No, we didn't. I had to think about it.
Have you ever played using the Wii U Pro Controller the correct way, which is strapping a Wiimote on top of it?
Yeah! Fuck yeah. That's what people would do.
That's what...
They would take the fucking...
That's what Nintendo told you to do.
Yeah. You fucking tape a goddamn Wii remote to the back of the Pro Controller. So
wait, they were telling people to do this?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a real thing.
Wow.
Remember the fucking lore scroll from Splatoon 1?
Oh my goodness.
Where the fossil of the Wii U, and there was a Pro Controller with the Wii remote taped to it. It's fucking hilarious.
Real ass thing.
Did you want to add anything else about the Wii U Pro Controller while you're at it, Landon?
What? No, like I said, Satan themselves made it. And it was, I mean, it was, I never owned it. I just threw them at people.
Right.
Yeah.
Justin, you mentioned when we talked about the Wii's classic controller that you didn't really play with these other side first-party controllers. So I'm assuming you didn't get any experience with the Wii U Pro Controller, did you?
No, I never owned it.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the next system that came out, which was the PlayStation 4, which came out with the DualShock 4. The DualShock 4 is the first departure for Sony's DualShock series, form factor wise. You still have the two sticks in the same orientation. You've still got the triangle, circle, X, square configuration. You've still got the split D-pad, although it is slightly differently designed. It's a little smoother, less. It doesn't have like rigid texture on it. But the actual form factor is quite a bit different. The triggers are actual triggers now, and there's now a touchpad in the middle. It has a speaker too. I didn't mention this, but the Wii also has a speaker on its on its Wii Remote that was actually used by quite a few games. Well, the DualShock 4 also incorporates a speaker and also has replaced the start and select buttons with options and share. From this point forward, we're going to be seeing controllers having a share button so you can like save content like screenshots and videos and like share them to social media, where they integrated social media into their systems. The controllers had a button to service this. There's also a light bar display that the DualShock would have, and it would tell you whether it was charging. It would tell you your player indicator. It could do other color shenanigans. And then one weird thing that they decided to add was a touchpad. It can be touched in a couple different ways for different button presses. Can be used as a sort of cursor, so you can like move your finger around on it to like type stuff up. It's really weird.
To quote the Nintendo DS ad campaign, touching is good.
Touching is good.
And to quote School Days, not School Days.
Oh,
the other one. What's the good one? The
Green?
Ghost Stories.
Ghost.
Oh,
Touch me.
touch me harder.
So yeah, the DualShock 4 changed quite a bit for Sony's controllers. It kept everything mostly intact, but added some new features. There's a headphone jack now, so you can just plug in a headphone jack to play online, have a headset plugged in, play with your friends, talk with your friends while you're, beating each other up or whatever. Notably, though, the battery life isn't the best on this. I've seen reports where it can go as high as about 10 or 12 hours, but I usually have only gotten about like 6 or 7, maybe 8 hours of playtime. So the battery life can be a little low, especially after it's been used for a really long time. But otherwise, I think it's really nice. I like how they changed the sticks to have like a little bit of a cave-in, and the texture is really nice to like kind of grab your fingers. So, I mean, overall I thought it was a pretty good controller, although the battery life was kind of but otherwise I like it. It's the DualShock 4. Landon's got quite a bunch of them. He's got Landon actually has the 25th PlayStation anniversary, or 20th anniversary. 20th anniversary PlayStation controller DualShock 4, where it's got like the PlayStation 1's controller color, which is really cool. Jack, did you want to talk about the DualShock 4 a little bit?
I also have that one, the PlayStation 1 20th anniversary. For some reason, my triggers on that one are really sensitive. Like even if you just kind of like just nudge it, it's like, oh, that's a register. Yep. You just fired 7 bullets from that. But no, aside from that, and like you said, the battery life isn't the best. My favorite DualShock. I've used all 5, and
there's only 4.
True. I forgot about that.
Touché.
I've used that one too, though, the DualSense, but we'll get to that. No, DualShock 4 is my favorite PlayStation controller.
Interesting. Okay.
My metric for this is that one day in August of 2017, I was balls deep into my first playthrough of Persona 5, and I played that game for 17 hours.
Yep, I remember this.
24-hour period, and my hands never cramped once, or like ever got like uncomfortable. I never felt like I had to take a break. Like, perfect for like comfort.
That's fair. If you can hold on to the same controller for 17 hours and not feel like your hands are tired, it's a pretty good controller.
Yeah. But battery life and
I was gonna say,
are a little
I'm sure I'm sure you have to put your controller plug in to charge while you're playing.
Well, I had two I have two controllers.
So you swapped.
So like when one was charging, I was using the other one.
Right. And
I would just swap them when one batteries started to die.
Justin, did you want to talk about the DualShock 4?
I definitely like the feel of it. I still think the touchpad, I think it was just a fucking wasted idea, because like I don't know. I don't get much utility out of it, except for the games that kind of force you to use it. So it's like I didn't really understand why.
I agree. I think that the touchpad, while it's okay, like not enough games actually really used it in a way that was meaningful. It was just kind of there draining his battery.
Yeah, I didn't really do it. Well, no, I think the thing that drained the battery was the fucking light they put on.
Oh yeah,
the light.
The light was really bad. They actually had to put out a firmware update so you could turn down the light on the controllers, so they wouldn't drain the battery.
It's so fucking bright.
Yeah, only a few games actually do anything aesthetic with it, where sometimes it would change colors, but that was fucking it.
Like, I think GTA could, if like you had the cops chasing you, like it would
do the police lights.
Yeah. Landon, did you want to talk about the DualShock 4 at all?
I mean, it's a perfectly fine controller. I use it when I'm doing like some of my computer stuff, like when I've been doing the Let's Play for The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky second chapter. Go watch that on our YouTube channel. So I've been using my 20th anniversary DualShock 4, made by Sony for the PlayStation 4. And you know it's usually my go-to. But yeah, the light on it's stupid, dumb.
The light is stupid. I agree.
Like, how am I supposed to see a light that's on a part of a controller I don't actively look at?
Yeah,
and I know.
Yeah, because it's like on the back part. It's like
they have the
revision
variants where there's a small light on the touchpad that goes through.
It's such a minor thing though. When the big
it has like this like part right on the outline where it like seeps through.
Well, it's also like directly across
on the
like,
top
the
part. Yeah, it's like right here.
But it's still like, why still have the light?
Yeah, they basically made like the touchpad like opaque on the edges so you could see the light. But yeah, no, I think the light indicator was probably like the most pointless addition to the DualShock 4.
The touchpad should have just been the light. Like, it should have been. It should have been see-through. And it should have.
I disagree with putting it at the front because now you got a fucking bright ass light shining in your eyes.
Well, I mean, you could adjust the brightness on it.
Yeah,
They could have made it like a dim-ish light.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
something that's not blinding.
That's
it's not
the
a
DualShock
flashlight.
4.
It's not a flashlight, and it's not a fleshlight, so don't worry about it.
No, that's the PlayStation Move.
Trust me, I've tried.
Oh yeah, speaking of, I did not include them because, but there are also peripherals. The PlayStation Move is a different controller. You have like these two wands, and the Kinect, which is literally just a camera that reads your movements. I didn't include stuff like this because, one, they're not meant to be played with the base library of the system, so they're kind of their own thing, so we're not going over them because that's opening up a whole other can of worms. One day we might talk about peripherals. We'll see. But we'll have to come up with ideas for peripherals to talk about. Maybe the PlayStation Move will be one of them. But we're going to move on.
We'll do a video on Guitar Hero controllers.
That's it.
Yes!
That's the only thing we'll talk about.
The next controller we're going to talk about, though, is the Xbox One controller. And it had a few small revisions, but it's
dumb, bad.
This guy does not like Xbox controllers.
He likes the Duke a little bit more.
So the Xbox One, it basically kind of just took the 360 controller and just kind of revamped it a little bit. You've got your sticks that are offset. You've got the D-pad is actually just the D-pad. It has options. It has a menu and view button. So it's got like basically your start and share buttons, although the other one kind of goes to a different thing. You've got your Xbox button, ABXY. You've got your triggers, and then you have your buttons up here, L, B, and right bumper. Like the previous controller, though, it does not have a rechargeable battery. I bought a third-party battery pack, so I do not have to buy AA batteries for this thing. And it comes with this weird, ugly, deformed cap that doesn't quite match the rest of my controller, but only kind of, sort of.
Is it Nyko?
No, it's Power A.
Damn.
But
even worse.
Yeah, this is the controller that comes with the Xbox One. This version that I currently am holding in my hand, if you're watching the VOD, is actually the 1S revision because they did revise it. Originally, the Xbox wireless controller did not have a headphone jack. It had this weird little input, and then if you plugged in an adapter, you could then plug in a headphone jack, and there was like a little module that you'd have that would control the headset. You'd have your volume up and down, your mic muting, stuff like that. But you had to plug that in order to plug the headphone jack in. The Xbox One S actually just added a headphone jack, the revision for that. This didn't come out though until like 2016 or so, whenever the Xbox One did. One S did, rather. The original version, as you might be able to see on the screen if you're watching the VOD, notably does not have a consistent design throughout with like material. It has a glossy top where the Xbox button is housed, and then the rest of it is the matte design. We'll just go around the room. We'll start with Jack. Jack, how do you feel about the Xbox One's wireless controller? What experience do you have with it?
I have a little bit of experience with it. Friends that have one, but I like it less than the 360 controller. Something about it just doesn't like feel quite as natural. It's the shoulder buttons are like, if I remember correctly,
the triggers
shoulder buttons
have a weird
are like
angle to them.
They're angled really weird, and the shoulder buttons are like hard clicks, right?
They are.
They're not like soft. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, honestly.
Yeah, because they don't like you have to press them in more than you do the ones for the 360.
Yeah, I'm not wild about those. Like the bumpers on the fucking 360 controller, they're like soft, but they're still clicks. Like you know,
that's fair.
It's pretty fucking solid. And the D-pad is better, but it's still not perfect. I don't know, something about it just doesn't quite feel right. But I mean, otherwise it's fine. It's just, I mean, I haven't touched a Series X, so I can't say for sure.
Well,
but
we'll get to
three,
that.
But I mean, between this one, and that one, I like that one the least.
Oh, the
but
Xbox
it's better
One
than the
S,
Duke.
yeah, it's better than the Duke. So this might be a bit of a hot take. I might be the only one that feels this way. This is one of my favorite controllers. The only thing I don't like about it is the fact I had to go buy a third-party battery to power this thing. I don't like that. But other than that, I mean, it was $15, so I can't really complain that much. But I love this controller. It is super comfy. I don't mind the triggers that much. It is a little funky. I don't think they're quite as good as the 360s, I'll agree. The D-pad, though, I have to disagree. I think the D-pad's solid. I don't think it's quite as good as like Sony's controllers or some of Nintendo's D-pads. Those are hit and miss, but some of them are better. The D-pad, though, is perfectly fine.
Maybe I'm just spoiled by Sony and Nintendo.
You might be spoiled by them. You might also just not have enough experience with it.
It's also been a while since I've used one, I'm speaking from memory.
I actually use this as my PC controller. I don't own an Xbox. I used to own an Xbox One. I don't have an Xbox One. I use this for my PC. I've played Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel with this. I've played Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 with this. I've played Toho games with this. This controller is one of my favorite controllers. It was like the first controller that I was like, this feels really, really good. Like, this is probably one of my favorite controllers. We'll go around the room at the end and we'll talk about our favorite ones, but this is definitely one of them. I love the Xbox One controller. I think it's fantastic. Like I said, my only problem is the fact that they did not pack in a battery with it. You have to go out and buy a rechargeable one separate. But I can't complain otherwise. It's really good. Justin, how do you feel about the Xbox One wireless controller? Do you have experience with it?
It honestly just feels like a 360 controller to me. There's definitely a little bit more, like, I guess you could say, this sounds weird, but like meat on the bumpers. Yeah. Like, they're chunky boys now.
Yeah, they're big.
The D-pad I didn't have much of a problem with, but that might just be because when you live with mediocrity, anything better than that is like a godsend. So it's like, I think I just like the D-pad just because it's not shit.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it just feels like a 360 controller to me. Like, I guess the
fair.
material feels a little better, or not better, but like different. But I don't know, it just feels right to me.
Anyway, Landon.
Yeah, Landon, do you want to add anything about the Xbox One wireless controller?
Trash.
Landon does not like Xbox controllers.
My goodness, no, I really don't. I mean, the 360 controller's okay-ish, but when you have to deal with other people's garbage for a living,
right.
it really makes you realize how easy it is for some of the controllers to be broken. And you're like talking about like how okay the D-pad is, and it makes me want to physically vomit.
I don't have problems with it.
I'm sure yours is specifically fine, but I feel like every person that's like, I'm trying to sell this controller, and I'm like, alright, if it's not drift, it's the D-pad's broken on a controller. Yeah,
Xbox gamers just don't take care of their controllers.
They really don't.
Yeah, all the Xbox players are all dude bros.
And, I mean, it goes further than the controllers, especially for the Xbox One and the 360 era. But, yeah, the controllers, I usually want to vomit on site.
Alright. If we don't have anything to add about the Xbox wireless controller, a couple years later, Microsoft did something pretty interesting. They came out with what they call the Elite controller, and the Elite controller is basically like a kind of like an enthusiast's more premium quality version of the controller. They have a few different models. The one that I have on the screen for the VOD is not the first version that they had. The first version only had a switch with 2 toggles. This one that I have on screen is their second version, the Series 2, which has 3 toggles, so there's one button that you press a bunch of times to set it, and it's basically the sensitivity for the triggers.
Specifically, you have the core version on screen.
Yes, but it has swappable pieces. There's a regular D-pad you can put in. There's this weird, like, disc-like D-pad that you can press. It kind of looks like a bent-up version of, like, the thing in Mario Sunshine that has, like, the reflective coating that you, like, can walk on from that one level. I don't know the level off the top of my head.
Oh, from Serena Beach?
Yes, that. It looks kind of like that, but it's folded up.
The mirrors?
Yeah. It looks kind of like that folded up. But it's got
just a circle pad.
Yeah, it's basically like a circle pad. There's different like sticks, versions of the sticks you can swap in and out. There's like different heights you can use. So like I know some people, they'll take the right stick that controls the camera out and they'll put in a taller version that comes with it. So like you have more fine control over the camera, stuff like that. So yeah. Oh, Jack's getting up. He's got something.
Uh-oh.
Does he have an Elite controller?
I don't have something. I have to pee.
Oh, he has. All right. Well, he's gonna go
better.
I'm gonna say so. I don't have experience with the Elite controller. I briefly held one. They also have these back paddles that you can remove and attach and assign to different functions as you wish. And this was a sort of thing that like a lot of third-party controllers were doing a lot of these weird things with like paddles and stuff like that. So Xbox came out with like a premium build. You got like a more heft to it. It's bulkier. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit less plastic, a little more metal. Because of that, it's a lot more expensive. You typically find the Elite controllers are in the range of about $160 to $200. Depends on which version you have. Like I said, I don't have a whole lot of experience though with them because I didn't have an Xbox, so I wasn't enthusiastic enough to get an Elite version of the controller. Justin, have you ever used an Elite controller for Xbox?
The base one is just fine for me.
Yeah, that's how I felt. What about you, Landon? I'm sure you've sold them. I'm sure you maybe have taken some in as trade-in. Maybe?
I mean, yeah, I've dealt with them. Out of all of Microsoft's controllers, the Elite Series controllers are actually pretty nice. Specifically, the Series 2.
Yeah.
Those ones, the Series 1 were but the Series 2, I feel like they went back and refined it. So if there's a controller that gets my sideways thumbs up from me, from Microsoft, this controller, but it's too expensive, so we'll take that sideways thumbs up and we'll move it back to a downward thumbs up.
Jack, did you have anything to add?
Thumbs down.
Not a damn thing.
Not a damn thing. All right.
Do you even know what controller we're on?
Yes.
Xbox Elite controller. So next up is the Joy-Con for the Nintendo Switch. We're already on the final stretch, guys. Joy-Con has a lot of the features that were in at least the Wii Remote or the Wii U gamepad, and they just kind of like smorgasborded everything together. You've got HD Rumble, which is a new unique version of Rumble, which is like more fine-tuned vibration, tailored to certain contexts. You have the plus and minus button returning, which are actually shaped like plus and minus buttons. A, B, X, Y are back. You have the ZL, ZR, L, and R buttons are still back. Interestingly, you can separate them into separate controllers, so you can use them as one controller on their side, similar to the Wii Remote, except these operate as one controller together. Unlike the Nunchuck, which can't operate as a separate controller, it has to be part of the Wii Remote. So they basically took the Wii Remote Nunchucks and just kind of like refined them. You also have a home button.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally, we can play RPGs with our arms crossed again.
Yeah.
Perfect.
They finally brought it back. We finally got it back, guys. One thing that I found interesting is that if you have it sideways, they did incorporate a set of shoulder buttons that you can use, and they still will often have games that make use of the LNR or ZR, ZL that are on the backs of on the sides of your controller now if you're using it sideways. You can use them separate, you can use them in a grip and use it like a standard controller. Yeah, these are, like, I know some people find the Joy-Cons to be a little too small. I think they're just about the right size. I really like these things. These things are cool as shit.
Literally the one thing I don't like about these, Joy-Con drift.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't personally experienced it, thankfully. I'm pretty fucking careful with my Joy-Cons, and honestly, I use the Pro controllers way more than I use the Joy-Cons for most games, unless I'm strictly playing handheld mode, but these are good. I like them. It's just the Wii Remote and Nunchuck again, but different.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
The drift is bad, though.
Unlike the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, these obviously have built-in batteries. They typically last about 15 to 20 hours, depends on usage. Oftentimes, I'll find that the right one will go out a little bit faster because it has slightly more features packed into it. It's got an NFC reader. It's got infrared sensor on this side, so it does. But they last quite a bit on one charge, and they will charge while they're on the sides of the system, even if the system's not docked. And obviously, they'll charge with the system if they're inserted into the dock. So, I mean, these things are super modular. I really like that. They service the modular nature of the Switch incredibly well. You'll notice that they split the D-pad up. If you're watching the VOD, you'll know, or if you see it on the screen, or if you have your own Switch.
Not a fan of that either.
They did split up the D-pad into 4 buttons.
It makes sense.
They had to do it. It was a necessity.
Yeah.
But it's weird.
It's weird.
It's so that you can split it up, and it's you get like a 1-for-1 for when you split the 2 controllers up. But it is definitely a little different. But yeah, I like the Joy-Cons overall. I think they're really fun. I used them for most of my playtime. Justin, how do you feel about the Joy-Cons?
I mean, I like them when they're, put together. They're a little, like, controller thingy. I don't know what you call that.
Dog ears.
Yeah, because when you take those apart and you have giant man hands like me, God, they're a nightmare to fucking use. But, like, I like them. I heard my sister apparently had the Joy-Con drift, but she apparently fixed it. I don't know how you do that, but like, so if there was Joy-Con drift, I've never experienced it. Like, I know, because I've had other controllers where the analog stick out of it fucked up. So I can, I understand that that's a bit annoying, but personally, I've never experienced it.
Yeah. Landon, did you have anything to add? You've had a lot of experience with the Switch.
Yeah, they're alright. They're just, without the grip, they're not super comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm talking, like, strictly with
just
the
the Joy-Con itself, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mention... Oh, yeah,
other than that, they're suitable. I mean, I just like Jack, I use them mostly when I'm in handheld mode. And even then, I'll still use a Pro Controller when I'm in handheld mode, so... Because I do tabletop.
I didn't mention, but aside from the grip that they can be slotted into to be a standard controller, they do... Jack was showing them off on video, but they do come with little grips that will apply to the rails on the sides, and they have straps. These are packed in with the console. You get those with the system, so you can put those on or not put them on as you see fit if you like that. But yeah, the Joy-Cons are yeah. I actually use my Joy-Cons a lot. I don't have the Pro Controller that I use for my Switch, so I've been basically stuck with playing with my Joy-Cons, and I have small hands, so they work pretty well for me. But alongside the Joy-Cons, if you were a more standard, wanted to play on the TV, wanted a nice, comfortable controller sort of thing, they also came out with the Pro Controller. The Pro Controller, the best comparison I have is like it's an extremely standard controller. You have the 2 offset sticks. You got your D-pad on the bottom. You've got the ABXY. Landon and I both have our Xenoblade 1.
I like how Landon is doing like this slow reveal for his Xenoblade 2 controller, and Cloud just like pulled it up on screen like it was nothing.
Yeah, just like it was nothing.
Or on camera. Which Stooge has the biggest hands? Me.
Yeah.
My hands are fucking massive.
Yeah, Jack has really big hands. You have your plus and minus, your home and share
Mine
buttons.
cover the whole camera.
They're in an orientation near the ABXY and the control stick, so they have easy spot to get to. They got their player indicator on the bottom. They do have rumble. They do have motion control. Unlike the classic controller for the Wii or the Wii U Pro Controller, this is a fully functional, fully featured controller. You can take this Pro Controller and you can operate everything the Switch wants to do with this controller. You don't lose anything. So for that, this is also a really good controller. Like, the only thing I wish is that, like, I know the Switch has it by itself in the tablet, but I really wish that they had added a headphone jack to the Switch Pro Controller in case you were playing on the TV and there was maybe a way to transmit the sound through that, like the DualShock 4. But other than that, like, this controller's super comfortable. The buttons are super satisfying to press down. The sticks feel really nice. The D-pad's serviceable. The grip's good. Like, this is a really good controller. Like, one of my favorites. Top 5 easily. Yeah, Jack, let's go around the table and talk about it.
Fucking excellent controller. I think, like, the only problem I have, and like this is nitpicky, but like sometimes the D-pad can like be a little sensitive when it comes to like button inputs. There have been a lot of times, and this is really the only game where I've ever had this issue, but in Celeste, when you're doing the air dash, it's very common, because I used the fucking Pro Controller when I played that game, and I used the D-pad primarily when I did, and there have been a lot of instances where I died because I meant to go either like straight, or I meant to go like straight right or straight left, and it's like, oops, did you mean to angle up or down?
Yeah.
And I'm like, No.
And that's a problem with a lot of Nintendo's D-pads after the N64 and I think GameCube. Because the D-pads used to have like this pivot, but the pivot also could wear out over time. And I guess they just gave up on the concept of having that pivot. So it's really easy to press on multiple inputs at the same time with this thing.
Yeah.
So I do agree with Jack. That is one small little nitpick, but otherwise it's, yeah. What else do you want to talk about?
I mean, like...
This thing has a 40-hour battery life, too. This thing has a really big battery life. You pay $70, you actually get $70 for a controller out of this.
Yeah. I remember people, like, bitching and moaning when the Pro Controller came out because of how expensive it was, because I think it was the first controller to cost $70.
Yep.
That's the standard now, but I remember when I bought my Switch and I tried doing when I was like playing on the system or like playing on the TV, I would use the Joy-Cons and the dog ears, and I'm like playing Breath of the Wild and I'm like, this doesn't feel quite right. So I ordered a Pro Controller and it was $70, but I'm just like, man, I don't regret it. This is the same Pro Controller that I've had since the beginning. In fact, I got both of these like in the first year of the Switch, and they both work perfectly, honestly.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, this, and mentioning again the fact that this is a fully featured controller, it does also have the NFC reader too on the right analog stick. So if you want to put your amiibos, like you don't have to pull out the whole Switch, just put on a little controller stick and you got it. Like it has everything. It's worth $70. It definitely holds up as a $70 controller. Justin, have you got experience with the Switch Pro controller?
Nope, we don't own that.
Yeah, I figured no, because like you said, you didn't get the Wii U Pro controller, you didn't get the Classic controller, so I figured you probably didn't get the Switch Pro controller. Landon, how do you feel about the Switch Pro controller?
So, the Switch Pro controller, my like favorite part is the speaker on the bottom.
That's not Landon is not holding up a Switch Pro controller, guys.
The only issue is it takes 6 fucking batteries to charge like the power of this thing.
He's holding up a Game Gear.
Now, if you get the cool attachment that it extends your like screen, oh, it is a Game Gear. Weird.
What's up with that?
I thought I had my Pro Controller in my hand.
One day we'll talk about handhelds.
One day. Let's make that today. All right.
No.
Episode 2.
Welcome.
Episode 2. Episode 2. Overlapping with episode 1.
The other two companies don't matter.
This is what you sign up for with GamingStooges. It's just chaos. We don't have structure here.
No, I do like the Pro Controller.
Yep. So we'll move on to the next system. So we're at the current generation of systems now. I mean, you could argue that the Switch is current gen since it's still going.
The Switch is current gen.
Yes. But we have the DualSense with the PS5, which so they did some changes to the DualShock 4, but really this is more of like a revamp of an evolution of the DualShock 4. It could be argued it could be considered a DualShock 5, but there are some differences. The main difference is so I mentioned back with the Switch we had the HD Rumble. It was a more fine-tuned version of vibration, more context-sensitive haptic feedbacks, and the DualSense basically incorporates that. It also has adaptive triggers, so the triggers that I'm pressing down on, if you are watching the VOD, these can actually be locked and like give resistance based on what you're doing. I believe that some Xbox games have made use of like the Xbox 360s, but not quite on the level that these do. The PlayStation 5's DualSense controller also has a built-in microphone, which has a button that you can turn it on and off. So you can actually just speak right into the controller and it'll just do everything for your commands. With the PlayStation 4, they used to have like the PlayStation camera, and you could like talk to do voice commands and have them do stuff. Well, you can just do it from the controller now. You could just be like, hey, PlayStation, do this thing. And the controller will be like, oh, hey, tell the PS5, do this thing. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as the DualShock 4. The touchpad has been changed shape-wise to be a little bit more angular, so it's a little easy to access with your fingers from far away. The circle, X, triangle, and square are now no longer on a little platform. They actually are just flush resting with the rest of the controller. So you have like they're naturally curvatured with the rest of the controller. I don't even know if that's a word. The L1 and R1 were largened, so they're actually just about a little bit as big as the triggers now. The PlayStation button now is shaped like the PlayStation logo, which I think is kind of cool. The back texture for the grip got the little PlayStation button logo design, so you've got the triangle, X, square, and circle like in really, really tiny texture on the back, which I thought was cool. It's two-toned. They come in different colors. The base one that you get with the console is going to have the white, but you can get black, blue, you can get pink. There's a bunch of different colors. Just like with a lot of other controllers, Joy-Cons have like a million different colors you can do. Other than that, like I said, same features. They took out the light bar and they just incorporated it into the area surrounding the touchpad, so that's good. Better battery life than the DualShock 4 as well. You can get a good 10 or 12 hours out of game time with it. If you have everything turned down, it's basically closer to 12. But yeah, I like this thing. I think this thing is really spiffy. This and like the Switch Pro controller are probably like my two favorite controllers. This one just wins out just a little bit just because the extra features it has, like the microphone, speaker, stuff like that. But yeah, really solid controller. I really like it a lot. It's going to go down as one of my favorites. Jack, you said you had some experience with the DualSense. Yeah.
I played Woe Dave on it. And I used it to access the Blu-ray menu for Bobobo. So, I have experience.
We'll say.
More experience
but
than
it
me.
plays Woe Dave pretty well. So, yeah, no, it's good. I like it. I have literally only used it in the week-long trip that I took to Landon's place.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And that's why he has more experience than me.
I don't know anyone else that has a PS5 in real life. In real life.
This isn't real life. This is a simulation.
In my general vicinity, that I have immediate semi.
Well, yeah, because the only people that have a PS5 is in their dreams.
You know, honestly, that's fair. That's fair. The only people that have PS5 are you know, yeah. No, okay. Justin, did you want to talk about the PS5's DualSense? I know that you have a family member who has one. You do not actually have one yourself, but maybe you've used it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just me. It feels a little bulkier than the PS4 controller does.
It is.
But it otherwise just kind of feels like, I don't know.
You know a lot of it. Holy crap.
It honestly just... Yeah. It honestly just feels like the PS4 Chunk Edition. So it's like, I don't know, it just feels like it's a little fatter, but otherwise, it almost doesn't feel like I changed controls at all. Like, maybe that's just me.
Okay. Landon, did you have anything to add about the DualSense?
It's kind of the bottom of the handles have a weird edge to them. And
yeah, they have like this weird flat edge. So like if your hand touches that a lot, I can understand why that's, because the DualShock 4 doesn't have that. It's nice rounded on the bottom, but the DualSense has like this weird like flat part.
I'll give the DualSense a 0 out of 10. Strong, like, big recommendation for me, 0 out of 10.
I don't know whether this is good or bad. Like,
just put it in the fucking garbage. What are you doing?
Strong recommendation. Put it in the garbage.
Yeah.
0 out of 10. It's aight.
Yeah, I don't know.
Perfect.
I don't know if this makes sense, but like the controller honestly feels like this is the digital age. Like this is like
it's very robotic feeling, right?
Yeah.
It definitely feels very like futuristic.
Back to that fucking robotic croissant.
The Seto Kaiba console.
Yeah. The sticks are pretty much the same as the DualShock 4s, although they are more heavily textured on the outside, I noticed as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the DualSense. And then the Xbox Series X came out around the same time, and they revised their controller. The Xbox Series X version of the Xbox wireless controller really only changes like two things.
Oh, is this the dirty controller?
The D-pad has now a full circular design again, but the D-pad, it's weird. It's like a mix of like the Elite controller and like the Xbox One controller, but it's like halfway in between. It's not really like either or. You've got like this weird like folding nature to the cardinal directions. And then there's a dedicated share button in the middle. And that's pretty much it. Like it has everything the same. Worth noting, much like the DualShock 2 and the DualShock 1 are cross-compatible with their systems, the Xbox wireless controller revision for the Series X works with Xbox One, and vice versa. You just lose out on that extra button and the difference in the D-pad. That's really it. But you can use them both interchangeably the same way. So that's pretty cool, at least. Jack, I assume you probably have not touched a Series.
Nope.
No?
I don't know if I've ever actually seen one before.
I've sold some. That's all I know. I've sold some. That's all I remember.
I literally don't know. Sometimes I forget that the Series X exists, honestly. Or Series S. Whatever.
It's the same
series.
thing. This Xbox Series X and S. Justin, do you have any experience with the Series X version of the wireless controller or not? You can say no, it's okay.
No, I don't think we have this one.
And then Landon, I'm guessing same thing.
What? No, I have everything to talk about this one. Let me go into a 10-hour discussion about this controller specifically.
Oh, Lennon, I'll join you.
Yeah? Where? Where we
why is it tall?
Why is it so short? I know, right?
What?
What?
Huh? I don't know. Look at how the shoulders. Look at how high the shoulders are above like the left stick and Y button.
But what if they were taller?
Like you look at.
I mean, it's the same thing with the. It's the same thing with the Xbox One. Well, actually, no.
Yes.
I guess it. I mean, I guess it's.
It might just be the shoulder buttons. It looks like an optical illusion.
Yeah, no, it is just the shoulder button.
Okay. There. It's got tall shoulders.
So, yeah, we don't really have a whole lot to say. It's basically the same as the Xbox One's version. It's just slightly altered. So, the last controller we're going to talk about, which we're probably not going to have much to say about either, is the DualSense Edge, which was Sony's version of the Elite controller model. That's a comparable. You have some like swappable elements. You've got paddles on the back of the DualSense controller. It's got more premium build. It has half the battery life for some reason. I don't like that. 5-6 hour battery life. Not a big fan. I have no experience with the DualSense Edge, and I have no intention of getting one unless they decide to actually have a better battery with it.
Alright, we're done.
I don't give a shit. Yep, we're done.
We're done talking about the controllers, going through the history. But, so, I'm going to split this into two parts. We can have different favorites, and we can have controllers that we considered revolutionary for their time. I want to go around, and we'll do the simpler one first. Top 3 or 5 favorite controllers. Jack, go.
Oh, God. Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo, that's good.
GameCube. DualShock 4.
DualShock 4.
Switch Pro controller.
Yep.
Gotta give it to my boy. Come on. Last spot. Come on.
Nah, you gotta do the Wii Remote Nunchuck.
I was thinking about that. Yeah. Actually, I might say 360.
Oh yeah, you didn't say 360. You said that thing was almost flawless. Got to give it to the 360.
Yeah, well, the D-pad sucks ass.
Yeah, but you gave it so much praise that you got to give it that.
Yeah. Thank you, Al.
My favorite ones are, I guess, kind of boring when you put them all together. I like the DualSense. I don't have these in a particular order. I love the DualSense. I love that. Switch Pro controller, really, really good. I like the Xbox wireless controller. I only have the Xbox One version, so that's the one I'm going to go with. Super Nintendo, because of how much I played with it. And the DualShock 2 or DualShock 1 will be my picks, because I have too much experience with the DualShock 1 and 2 to not have this as one of my favorites. I've played too many games with this thing. So yeah, those are my 5. Justin, what would you say are your favorites?
Definitely 360. I'm still a whore for the Genesis. I can't deny that. I like the Dreamcast controller because, you know, like I said, if you like the Xbox controller, I don't really think the Dreamcast controller is that different. It's just differently shaped.
Doesn't have a second stick, but the games didn't really need it.
Definitely the PS2 controller. I love the shit out of that fucking controller.
DualShock 2.
And what would my last one be? Probably, like, I definitely wasn't as enthusiastic about it as you guys, but I definitely like the Wiimote.
Okay. Very interesting picks. I like them. Landon, what are your favorite controllers? He's got Cheese Whiz with him. Is Cheese Whiz your favorite controller?
Yeah.
God's controller.
You gotta go with... Obviously, God, when God made a controller...
He made the Wii U gamepad.
Yeah, so we'll say that one is up there. You can play Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker on this thing.
You gotta give it to the Wii U gamepad for that.
Runner 2.
True.
Paper Mario. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Never mind, I hate this thing.
We got him.
No, I do like the gamepad. I'll probably just go down the line. Gamepad, Wiimote, DualShock 4, Switch Pro controller. This not necessarily in order.
Mine was also not in order.
Yeah, neither was mine.
I don't know what I'd do with the last slot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say those 4. Those are the 4 that come to mind. Yeah.
All right.
Probably the 64 controller, because I can peg someone, or I can peg 3 different people at once.
I will say, I didn't get to mention this, but one reason I really, really like the Switch Pro controller above a lot of others is the A, B, X, Y buttons are so satisfying to press. Like, these are some of my favorite face buttons on a controller. They're so spongy and resistant, and I love that. So, we'll go back around. Jack, if you had to pick, like, 3 controllers that are probably, like, the most important controllers in the evolution of controllers, which ones would you say are probably the most important?
Super Nintendo, DualShock 1, the one with the control sticks. Yeah. I'm not sure if... and maybe... That's tough. I don't know.
Tough? You want to pass it?
Those two for sure. Maybe sure. Dreamcast? Maybe 360. Maybe... I don't know. So, that's tough. Those 2.
My top 3 most important controllers would definitely be Super Nintendo controller. The ABXY. It's like one of the most important things. Like, every controller has some sort of ABXY style setup. You cannot have a controller without 4 face buttons, and at least one set of shoulder buttons.
I would argue that the Super Nintendo is the most important controller.
I would be inclined to agree. I don't know if I would say the same, but I would definitely be inclined to agree. The next one, DualShock came out with sticks, mandated rumble within the controller instead of it being an attachment. And the last one, I'm actually going to say the Wavebird. The fact that it's wireless is so huge. Like, yes, there's probably controllers that came out that were wireless at some point, but they really finally made it popular to be a wireless controller. And we have wireless controllers for all of these are wireless now. Wavebird did it first, so I'm gonna have to give it to Wavebird for the last slot. Justin, what do you would say would be your top 1 to 3 most influential, important controllers?
I definitely think, I honestly believe the 64 is one, because it had the whole, controllers were finally adding sticks to everything.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
I'm pretty sure that came before the DualShock 1.
Yes. Oh, yes. The DualShock 1 didn't come out till 97, and it was late 97 at that.
Yeah. Then it would be... Let me think. I think, probably the... Yeah, I actually think... I don't know if I'd say, specifically one type of DualShock, but I think the DualShock in general, because it standardized, the analog setup for, the PlayStation, and it became, kind of set in stone after that.
Yeah.
And, let me think.
500 million PlayStations later, they still have the goddamn same stick setup.
Yeah. It changed shape a little bit, but it's still the same. What would number 3 be? Number 3...
Another good pick would probably be the Wii Remote, just for having motion control.
Yeah, I think motion control, set up some interesting concepts for the rest of the industry.
6X had it, but the Wii Remote really used it, so...
Well, that's because the Wiimote was specifically focused on that.
Yeah. Landon, what would you say are what you feel are the most important?
We got the NES with the D-pad.
Yeah, that's a good pick too.
That's it. That's the only important control. All the rest suck. Did you see that one that was the literal wedge? It was like a door wedge.
Yes. Yeah. Let's bring that back up.
Guitar
the Atari 7800.
Yeah.
Hold up. Let me.
Actually, that one's the most important controller. The one that's a
that thing is wedge. So funky looking.
Oh god, it's the cursed photo again.
Yeah. Oh jeez.
Uh-oh. Hello?
Hi.
Oh.
7 days.
Do you have any other picks, Landon?
No, just the fucking wedge in the NES controller. That's all that matters.
Alright. So yeah, that was our discussion. Long-winded, but I mean, this is our podcast. We're going to go for a couple hours at a time, talk big about various topics in video games. If you haven't, please join our Discord. Let us know how you feel about game controllers. If you're typing in the YouTube comments, this will be up there too. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing us rant about controllers for 3 hours almost. We'll see you next time with another hopefully interesting topic to have a nice long discussion about. But as you can see us on all our socials. We have a Twitter. We don't really use it, but we have one. Obviously our Discord. We have our YouTube, Twitch. We're going to be moving to Spotify, maybe Apple Music. I don't know. We got to set that up. We're going to be in a lot of places. So we will see you around. We hope you guys take care. Have a good day. Stay safe. Stay hydrated. Enjoy your day and have a good night.
Bye.
Goodbye.